the story of a child marriage survivor. Layla was 8 years old when she was engaged to her older cousin, a tradition cloaked in gifts and praise. As a child, she saw it as a game, a part of her family's culture she didn't question. But as she grew older and began attending school in America, she realized her life was not her own. By 14, her family's plans turned sinister. They sought to bring her husband to the US, to assert control over her growing independence. When she resisted, she was met with violence, ultimately placed in foster care. Yet, even in her newfound safety, Layla felt the invisible chains of her past. Her dreams were plagued by shadowy figures, whispers from her childhood, that followed her wherever she went. The further she tried to escape, the more these shadows entwined with her life, turning her advocacy against child marriage into a fight for survival. As Layla works tirelessly to break the cycle for other girls like her, she discovers the horrifying truth behind her family's tradition, an ancient vow binding generations to an unholy shadow. The more she uncovers, the closer the shadows come, threatening to consume her and silence her forever. Can Layla escape the curse that has haunted her family for centuries? Or will the vows made in her childhood claim her soul? Let's read together. The Child Bride. Layla's earliest memory of her engagement was the sound of laughter. She remembered the warm, golden glow of the living room light, the chatter of relatives, and the heavy scent of rosewater lingering in the air. She was 8 years old, her tiny hands clutching the edges of a red velvet dress her mother had picked out for her. "You look like a princess," her aunt had said, pinning a glittering gold necklace around her neck. A princess. That was all Layla could focus on. She twirled in her dress, the skirt flaring out around her, as the adults smiled and clapped. A box of colorful sweets sat on the coffee table, next to a stack of envelopes stuffed with money. It wasn't until later, when her older cousin knelt before her and placed a simple gold ring on her finger, that Layla realized something was different. "You are my bride now," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Layla had laughed, thinking it was a game, a strange celebration. The party was joyous, filled with music and laughter. But Layla couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The adults exchanged knowing glances, their smiles too wide, their voices too loud. When she asked her mother what the celebration was for, her mother knelt and cupped Layla's face in her hands. "It's for you, Habibti," she said softly. "You've made your family very proud." Layla didn't understand. She just nodded, distracted by the shiny gifts piled high on the table. A new doll with golden curls, a pair of glittering shoes, a bracelet that jingled when she moved her wrist, the whispering walls. That night, as the celebration wound down, Layla was sent to bed early. She lay in her room, clutching her new doll, the faint hum of voices from the living room lulling her to sleep. But as the house quieted, a new sound emerged, soft whispers in a language she didn't fully understand. At first, Layla thought it was her parents speaking in the next room. But the whispers were faint, coming from the walls themselves. She pressed her ear to the plaster, her small fingers clutching the edges of the blanket. "Layla." Her name drifted through the silence, barely audible. She jerked back, her heart racing. "Mama," her voice trembling. Her mother appeared in the doorway moments later, her expression soft but tired. "What is it, Habibti?" "I heard something," Layla said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It said my name." Her mother smiled, smoothing Layla's hair. "You've had a long day. It's just your imagination." But as her mother tucked her in and turned off the light, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was listening. A new normal. In the weeks that followed, Layla's life returned to a semblance of normalcy. She played with her friends in the courtyard, went to school, and helped her mother in the kitchen. The gold ring on her finger felt strange at first, but she grew used to it, forgetting it was even there. But the whispers didn't stop. They came at night, faint and persistent, like a distant voice carried on the wind. Some nights, Layla would hear footsteps outside her room, heavy and deliberate. When she opened the door, the hallway was always empty, a warning unheeded. One evening, Layla's grandmother pulled her aside, her gnarled fingers gripping Layla's arm tightly. "Do you understand what this means, child?" she asked, her voice low and stern. Layla shook her head, her eyes wide. This is a promise, her grandmother said, tapping the ring on Layla's finger. A promise you can't break. Layla didn't know what to say. Her grandmother's words were heavy, laden with something Layla didn't yet understand. Be a good girl, her grandmother continued, her voice softening. And don't ask questions. Cliffhanger ending? That night, Layla had her first dream of the shadow. It appeared at the foot of her bed, a tall, formless figure cloaked in darkness. It didn't move, didn't speak, but its presence was suffocating. Layla woke with a start, her chest heaving. The room was empty, but the whispers were louder now, their words incomprehensible but laced with urgency. She looked down at her ring, the gold glinting faintly in the moonlight. For the first time, it felt like a chain. The whispering walls. The whispers returned the next night, louder this time. They seemed to seep out of the walls, surrounding Layla like a shroud. She lay still in her bed, clutching her doll tightly, her ears straining to make sense of the hushed voices. Layla, her name floated through the darkness, sending a chill down her spine. She bolted upright, her small heart pounding. Mama, she called softly, her voice trembling. No response. She slid out of bed, her bare feet brushing against the cold floor as she crept toward the hallway. The house was dark, the faint glow of moonlight casting long shadows. An empty hallway. Layla peeked into her parents' room, but they were fast asleep. The soft rhythm of their breathing was the only sound she could hear, a stark contrast to the eerie whispers she'd left behind in her room. She tiptoed back and stood in her doorway, staring into the shadows. The whispers had stopped, but the silence felt heavier, more oppressive. Just my imagination, she whispered to herself, repeating her mother's comforting words. But as she climbed back into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were listening. A disturbing pattern. Over the following weeks, the whispers grew more frequent. They came in bursts, often when Layla was alone in her room or walking down the hallway. She tried to tell her parents, but her mother dismissed her concerns with a wave of her hand. You are just nervous about all the attention, her mother said. Everyone is proud of you, Habibti. You are growing up. But Layla didn't feel proud. She felt trapped. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. This is a promise you can't break. The shadows take form. One evening, as Layla sat at the dining table coloring a picture, she saw it for the first time, a shadow that didn't belong. The room was brightly lit, the soft yellow glow of the overhead light casting clear, defined shadows. But this one was different. It was darker, denser, and it moved when nothing else did. Layla froze, her crayon hovering above the paper. The shadow lingered at the edge of her vision, just beyond the doorway. Hello? She called, her voice small. The shadow shifted, retreating into the hallway. Layla stood, her legs trembling, and stepped cautiously toward the doorway. But when she peered into the hallway, it was empty. A chilling realization. That night, Layla lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The shadow had felt wrong, like it didn't belong in her home. And yet deep down she felt as though it had always been there, watching her. The family's silence. The next morning, Layla hesitated to tell her parents about the shadow. They hadn't believed her about the whispers, and she doubted they would believe her now. Instead, she confided in her older cousin Amina, who was visiting from out of town. A shadow? Amina asked, her brow furrowing. Layla nodded. It was in the hallway last night. It moved, but there was no one there. Amina's expression darkened. Did you tell anyone else? No, Layla said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why? Amina hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as though checking to see if anyone was listening. Sometimes, the house remembers things it shouldn't, she said cryptically. What do you mean? Layla asked, her stomach twisting. But Amina just shook her head. It's nothing. Forget I said anything. The wedding ring. That night, as Layla lay in bed, she turned the gold ring on her finger absent-mindedly. It felt heavier than usual, its cool surface pressing against her skin. She stared at it, her mind racing. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol, a promise. But a promise to whom? The whispers returned, louder than ever, drowning out her thoughts. Cliffhanger ending? Layla sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The whispers weren't coming from the walls this time. They were coming from the ring. Her hand trembled as she pulled the ring off, holding it up to the moonlight. For a brief moment, the gold seemed to glimmer unnaturally, and a faint voice echoed in her mind. "You belong to us." The room plunged into darkness, and the last thing Layla saw was the shadow moving toward her. The American dream. The plane ride to America was the most thrilling experience of Layla's young life. She pressed her face against the window, marveling at the clouds below and the endless expanse of sky. For a brief moment, she felt free, like the whispers, shadows, and weight of her engagement were left behind on the ground. Her father, seated beside her, leaned over and whispered, "This is your new beginning, Habibti. A chance to make our family proud." Layla smiled and nodded, but his words carried a weight she didn't yet understand. A new world. The streets of their new neighborhood were nothing like the narrow, bustling roads of her childhood. Here, the houses stood tall and clean, with wide lawns and bright, white fences. The air smelled different, crisp and cool, with none of the heavy spices she was used to. Layla started school a week later, her excitement mingled with fear. Everything felt so unfamiliar: the language, the customs, the other children with their confident voices and carefree laughter. But what stood out the most was the freedom. Her classmates talked openly about their hopes and dreams, their plans for the future. It was a stark contrast to the quiet submission she'd been taught. For the first time, Layla wondered, "What do I want for my future?" The shadows followed. At first, Layla believed she had escaped the strange occurrences of her old home. The whispers were gone, and the oppressive feeling of being watched had faded. But it didn't last. One night, as she worked on her homework at the dining table, she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned quickly, but there was nothing there. She dismissed it as her imagination, but over the next few weeks, the shadows began to return. Subtle at first, flickering at the edges of her vision. Then they grew bolder, lingering in the corners of rooms and stretching unnaturally across the walls. A growing independence. As Layla adjusted to life in America, she began to push back against the traditions that had shaped her childhood. She made friends at school, joined the art club, and started wearing jeans instead of the long dresses her mother preferred. Her father's disapproval was immediate and sharp. "You are forgetting who you are," he said one evening, his voice low and stern. "I am just trying to fit in," Layla replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fitting in doesn't mean abandoning your family," her father snapped. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. The ring's grip. Layla started noticing the ring again. She had grown used to its weight on her finger, but now it felt heavier, almost like it was tightening around her skin. One night, as she lay in bed, she tried to take it off. It wouldn't budge. She pulled harder, her finger turning red, but the ring remained stubbornly in place. Exhausted, she gave up and fell asleep. In her dreams, the whispers returned. They were louder now, insistent, repeating the same words over and over. "You belong to us," her parents' plan. As Layla grew more independent, her parents grew more watchful. They noticed her newfound confidence, her laughter with boys at school, and the way she resisted their attempts to control her. One evening, Layla overheard a hushed conversation between her parents. "She's forgetting her place," her mother said. "We need to remind her." Her father's voice was grim. "I'll call her cousin. It's time he joined us here." Layla's blood ran cold. She knew what this meant. They were planning to bring her husband to America, to solidify the bond she had been trying so desperately to escape. The shadows intensified. That night, the shadows were more aggressive than ever. They moved across her bedroom walls, their forms sharp and jagged. Layla sat frozen in her bed, clutching her blanket tightly. Then, for the first time, she saw the shadow take form. It stood at the foot of her bed, tall and menacing, its hollow eyes fixed on her. "Who are you?" Layla whispered, her voice trembling. The shadow didn't answer. It simply pointed at her hand. Layla looked down at the ring, its gold band glinting faintly in the moonlight. "You belong to us," the shadow whispered, its voice cold and hollow. Cliffhanger ending. The next morning, Layla woke to find the ring had loosened on her finger. But as she stared at it, she realized something was different. The gold band was no longer smooth. Faint etchings had appeared on its surface, symbols she didn't recognize. But that sent a chill down her spine. And then she heard it again, the faint whisper of the shadow's voice. "You can't run from us." The cage tightens. Layla sat at the dining table, her gaze fixed on the gold ring that still clung to her finger. The etchings on its surface were faint but unmistakable. Swirling symbols carved so finely they seemed to shimmer when caught in the light. She had no idea how they appeared overnight, but their presence filled her with a deep unease. Her parents were in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. She couldn't make out every word, but phrases floated through the air like daggers. They spoke of her cousin, her husband in name, and how they could expedite his arrival. Layla's stomach churned. She felt the walls closing in, the life she had begun to build at school slipping further away with every whispered word. A family's pressure. The next evening, her father called her into the living room. Layla sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her mother sat beside her, her expression soft but resolute, while her father leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "Layla, we've noticed how distracted you've been lately," her father began. "You've been spending too much time with your friends. It's time to focus on what's important." Layla knew what he meant, but she stayed silent. Her father continued, his voice firm. "Your cousin is making arrangements to come here. It's time you started thinking about your responsibilities to your family." "My responsibilities," Layla repeated softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," her mother said, placing a hand on Layla's knee. "You've been given a gift, Layla, a chance to strengthen our family, to honor our traditions." Layla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I never asked for this," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted any of it." Her father's face darkened. "This is not about what you want. It is about what is right." The shadow grows stronger. That night, Layla lay in bed, her mind racing. The whispers returned, louder than ever. They surrounded her, echoing off the walls, their words overlapping until they were incomprehensible. And then the shadow appeared. It moved toward her with a deliberate slowness, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Layla froze, her body rigid with fear. "You belong to us," the shadow said, its voice low and resonant. "No," Layla whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't." The shadow tilted its head, as though studying her. Then it raised its hand, and pointed to the ring on her finger. Layla's hand trembled as she looked down. The etchings on the ring were glowing faintly, their light pulsing in time with her racing heart. The shadow's voice softened, almost pleading. "You cannot break the vow." A desperate plea. The next morning, Layla tried to speak to her mother. She described the whispers, the shadows, the ring that seemed to tighten on her finger whenever she tried to remove it. Her mother frowned, her hands busy chopping vegetables at the kitchen counter. "You are letting your imagination run wild," she said without looking up. "You've always had a vivid mind, Layla. But it's time to grow up." Layla's frustration boiled over. "This isn't my imagination. Something is happening to me, and you don't even care." Her mother's knife stopped mid-slice. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Do you know what would happen to this family if you refused your duty? Do you understand the shame it would bring?" "This isn't about shame," Layla said, her voice rising. "It's about me, my life, my future." Her mother's gaze hardened. "Your life is not your own, Layla. It never was." The shadow's grip tightens. That night, the shadow returned. It was bolder now, its presence filling the room. It stood at the foot of her bed, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Layla sat up, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this to me?" The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it reached for her hand, its long, smoke-like fingers brushing against the ring. Layla gasped as a searing pain shot through her finger, spreading up her arm. Images flashed before her eyes, visions of her engagement ceremony, her grandmother's stern warnings, her parents' whispered plans. The shadow leaned closer, its voice a low growl. "You cannot escape." Cliffhanger, ending. The next morning, Layla woke to find her hand bandaged. She didn't remember how it happened, but the pain was still there, a dull throb that wouldn't fade. Her parents were waiting for her in the kitchen, their expressions grim. "Your cousin will be here in 2 weeks," her father said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Layla's stomach dropped. And you will do as you are told, her mother added. Layla felt the weight of the ring on her finger, heavier than ever. As she looked at it, the faint glow of the etchings returned, pulsing faintly as though in warning. The shadow's words echoed in her mind. You cannot escape. The breaking point. The days leading up to her cousin's arrival felt like a countdown to the end of Layla's world. Her parents had grown colder, their words clipped and their expressions stern. Even her mother, who often softened after arguments, seemed unrelenting now. Layla spent most of her time in her room, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and desperation. The ring on her finger felt heavier than ever, its faint glow growing stronger each night. The shadow, now a constant presence, lingered at the edges of her vision, its hollow eyes filled with almost predatory patience. You cannot escape, the shadow whispered one night, its voice curling through the room like smoke. Layla clenched her fists, her fear giving way to anger. Watch me, she whispered back, a bold defiance. The next day at school, Layla confided in her best friend Ava. They sat under a tree in the far corner of the schoolyard, their voices low. I have to run, Layla said, her hands trembling as she spoke. If I stay, they'll marry me off. I'll lose everything. Ava's eyes widened in shock. Run? Where would you go? I don't know, Layla admitted, but I can't stay here. Ava reached out, gripping Layla's hand tightly. You don't have to do this alone, we can figure it out together. For the first time in weeks, Layla felt a spark of hope. The confrontation. That evening, Layla returned home with a plan. She would pack her belongings, sneak out in the middle of the night, and leave before her cousin arrived. But as she entered the house, she knew something was wrong. Her parents were waiting for her in the living room, their faces grim. Sit down, her father said, his voice cold. Layla hesitated but complied, her heart pounding. Her mother held up a piece of paper, for an email Layla had sent to Ava, outlining her plan to escape. What is this? Her mother demanded, her voice trembling with fury. Layla's stomach dropped. How did you? Her father slammed his hand on the table, cutting her off. Do you understand what you've done? The shame you've brought on this family? This isn't about shame, Layla said, her voice shaking. It's about my life, my future. I am not a child anymore. I should get to decide what happens to me. Her father stood abruptly, his face dark with rage. You think you have a choice? You were promised, Layla. A promise is sacred. The shadow intervenes. As her father advanced, the room grew colder. The lights flickered, and the whispers began soft at first, then louder, overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Layla froze as the shadow appeared, materializing behind her father. Its form was larger now, more defined, its hollow eyes burning with an unnatural light. Her parents didn't seem to notice. Her father continued yelling, his voice growing louder and more threatening. Stop, Layla whispered, her eyes fixed on the shadow. Her father didn't hear her. Stop, she screamed, her voice echoing through the room. The shadow moved swiftly, its long, smoke-like arms reaching for her father. He froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening as the shadow wrapped around him. A terrifying revelation. Her mother screamed, rushing toward her husband, but the shadow blocked her path. Layla sat frozen, her mind unable to process what was happening. You broke the vow. The shadow hissed, its voice resonating through the room. There is a price. No, Layla whispered, tears streaming down her face. This isn't what I wanted. The shadow turned its hollow gaze on her, its presence suffocating. You cannot escape the bond. It is tied to blood, to family, to you. Layla clutched the ring on her finger, the metal burning hot against her skin. Take me, she said, her voice trembling. Leave them alone. Take me instead. The shadow paused, its form shifting as though considering her offer. Cliffhanger ending. The shadow extended to one of its smoke-like arms, its claw-like fingers brushing against Layla's forehead. You belong to us, it whispered, its voice softer now, almost gentle. The room went dark, the whispers fading into silence. When the lights flickered back on, the shadow was gone. Her father lay unconscious on the floor, her mother sobbing beside him. Layla looked down at the ring on her finger. The etchings were gone, replaced by a single crack that ran through the center of the band. The whispers were gone, but the weight of the ring remained, heavier than ever. The silent shadow. The house was eerily quiet the next morning. Layla sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ring on her finger. The crack running through its surface seemed deeper in the daylight, as if the metal itself was fracturing under some unseen pressure. Her parents hadn't spoken to her since the incident the night before. Her father sat in his armchair, staring blankly out the window, while her mother moved through the house in silence, her face pale and drawn. The air in the house felt heavy, as though the shadow's presence lingered, waiting for its next move. A frightening curiosity. As the hours passed, Layla's unease grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow's appearance was tied to more than just the ring. There was something deeper, something buried in her family's past. She decided to start with the attic, a place she had avoided since they moved into the house. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed, her heart pounding in her chest. The attic was dimly lit, dust motes swirling in the faint light streaming through the single window. Boxes and old trunks were stacked haphazardly, their contents spilling onto the floor. Layla's eyes landed on a small, ornate chest tucked in the corner. It was different from the rest, its dark wood carved with intricate patterns that reminded her of the etchings on the ring. A box of secrets. The chest's lock was rusted, but it popped open with a gentle tug. Inside, Layla found a collection of yellow papers and faded photographs. The photographs were of her grandmother and other family members she didn't recognize. In one of the pictures, her grandmother stood beside a man, both of them young and smiling. But it was the papers that caught her attention. They were letters, written in her grandmother's handwriting, and they told a chilling story. The letters spoke of a pact made generations ago, a vow that tied their family to a shadowy presence in exchange for prosperity and protection. But there was a cost. Any broken promises within the family would summon the shadow to collect its due. Layla's hands trembled as she read the final letter. The ring is the key. It binds the vow and carries the weight of the promise. Do not break the vow, or the shadow will come. A visit to the past. That evening, Layla confronted her grandmother during a video call. The older woman's face appeared on the screen, her features weathered but her eyes sharp. "Grandma, I need to know the truth," Layla said, holding up the cracked ring. Her grandmother's expression darkened. "Where did you find that?" "You know where," Layla replied. "It's been on my finger since I was 8. I know about the pact. I know about the shadow." Her grandmother sighed, leaning closer to the camera. "You weren't supposed to know. The vow was meant to protect the family, to keep us safe, but your parents, they pushed too hard, they broke the balance." "What does that mean?" Layla asked, her voice trembling. "It means the shadow is here because of them," her grandmother said. "But it won't stop until the debt is paid." The shadow's connection. That night, Layla dreamed of the shadow. In the dream, she stood in a vast, dark void, the air thick with whispers. The shadow emerged from the darkness, its form towering and oppressive. "You belong to us," it said, its voice resonating in her chest. "Why me?" Layla asked, tears streaming down her face. The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it extended its hand, palm open. In its hand was a ring identical to the one on her finger, glowing faintly. "The vow binds you," the shadow said. "The debt must be paid." Layla woke with a start, her body drenched in sweat. The whispers were gone, but the weight of the shadow's words lingered. A new determination. The next morning, Layla sat at the dining table, her mind racing. She had pieced together enough of the truth to know that the shadow wouldn't stop until the vow was resolved. She decided to confront her parents. They had been silent long enough. "You knew," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You knew about the vow, about the shadow." Her mother's hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. "We didn't think it would come for you," she whispered. "We thought we could keep it at bay." Her father sighed, his shoulders slumping. "The shadow only comes when a vow is broken." "You didn't think," Layla interrupted, her anger bubbling to the surface. "You used me to keep a promise you never intended to honor." Her parents didn't respond. Cliffhanger ending. Layla stood, her chair scraped against the floor. "I am not going to let this curse control me. If you don't fix this, I will." Her father's head snapped up. Layla, don't. But she was already walking toward the door, the ring burning against her finger as though urging her forward. As she stepped outside, a chill ran down her spine. The shadow was waiting, its hollow eyes fixed on her. You cannot escape, it whispered. Layla clenched her fists, her fear giving way to determination. I am not running anymore, she said, stepping toward the darkness. The pact's price. Layla stood at the edge of the woods behind her house, the ring burning cold against her skin. The shadow lingered just beyond the tree line, its form a shifting mass of darkness. It didn't move closer, but its hollow eyes bore into her, a silent challenge. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The vow was meant to protect the family, but your parents broke the balance. Layla clenched her fists. She didn't fully understand what breaking the balance meant, but she knew one thing for certain. If the shadow had come for her, it wouldn't leave until the price of the broken vow was paid. Clues in the chest. Returning to the attic, Layla pulled the ornate chest closer and sifted through its contents. Beneath the letters and photographs, she found a bundle of old brittle papers tied together with a faded ribbon. As she untied it, her heart sank. The documents were written in an older dialect of her native language, one she struggled to read, but scattered throughout the pages were symbols, intricate, swirling marks identical to those that had appeared on her ring. Among the papers was a handwritten note, different from the others. The words were scrawled hastily, the ink smudged. To break the vow, the offering must be returned, and the truth must be spoken. Only then will the shadow release its claim. Layla stared at the note, her thoughts racing. The offering, she murmured. What does that even mean? Seeking guidance. Later that evening, Layla called her grandmother again. The old woman's face appeared on the screen, her expression weary. Grandma, Layla began, holding up the note. I found this in the attic. What does it mean? Her grandmother's eyes widened slightly. You weren't supposed to find that, she said softly. What is the offering? Layla pressed. And what truth needs to be spoken? Her grandmother hesitated, her gaze shifting away from the screen. The offering is what binds the vow. In our family, it has always been the ring. It represents the promise, the connection between the living and the shadow. And the truth? Her grandmother's expression darkened. The truth is what your parents are too afraid to admit. The vow was broken when they tried to force you into a promise you didn't choose to make. They dishonored the pact. Layla felt a surge of anger. So, this is their fault? No, her grandmother said firmly. The shadow isn't bound by blame. It doesn't care who is at fault. It only cares that the vow is fulfilled or undone. The first step, armed with this new knowledge, Layla knew she had to return the ring to the shadow. She waited until nightfall, when the house was quiet, and the shadows outside the window seemed to pulse with anticipation. She slipped out the back door and made her way to the woods, clutching the ring tightly in her hand. The cold night air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. The shadow was waiting for her, its massive form blending seamlessly with the darkness of the trees. You came, it said, its voice a low rumble. Layla held out the ring. This is the offering. Take it and leave me alone. The shadow didn't move. The offering is not enough, it said. The vow was broken by more than the ring. Layla's heart sank. Then what do you want? The shadow tilted its head, its hollow eyes glinting faintly. The truth. The confrontation. Layla returned home, her frustration mounting. The shadow's demand echoed in her mind. What truth could possibly satisfy it? Her parents were in the living room when she entered, their conversation halting as they saw her. I need to talk to you, Layla said, her voice shaking. Her father frowned. What is it now? Layla held up the ring. I know about the vow. I know about Shadow. And I know that you broke the pact when you tried to force me into something I didn't choose. Her parents exchanged a glance, their faces pale. You have to tell the truth, Layla said, her voice rising. It's the only way to stop this. Her mother sighed, tears welling in her eyes. We were desperate, Layla. We thought we could protect you by keeping the tradition alive. We didn't realize. Her father cut her off. We didn't realize it would come for you instead of us. Layla stared at them, her anger bubbling to the surface. So you used me. You sacrificed me to save yourselves. Her father shook his head. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Layla demanded. A terrible choice. Her mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. The truth is, we didn't know how to break the cycle. It's been in our family for generations. We thought, if we kept the tradition alive, it would spare us. Layla's hands clenched into fists. You didn't spare anyone. You just passed the curse down. Her father's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Layla took a deep breath, turning the ring over in her hand. The shadow said the truth has to be spoken. Now it has. But I don't think it's enough. Her mother looked at her, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? Layla's gaze hardened. The vow wasn't just broken by words, it was broken by actions. We have to do more than talk, we have to fix it. Cliffhanger, ending. That night, as Layla prepared to return to the woods, the shadow appeared in her room. Its presence was overwhelming, filling the space with a suffocating cold. You understand now, it said, its voice low and resonant. Layla nodded, clutching the ring tightly. I am ready to fix it, but you have to show me how. The shadow tilted its head, and for the first time, its hollow eyes seemed to soften. The path will cost you everything, it said. Layla swallowed hard, her voice steady. I don't care. I am ending this. The binding ritual. The shadow led Layla deep into the woods, its towering form gliding silently between the trees. The moon hung low in the sky, casting faint silver light over the twisting branches and uneven ground. Layla clutched the ring in her hand, the cold metal biting into her palm. Every step she took felt heavier, as though the forest itself were trying to pull her back. But she pressed on, her resolve firm. She had made a choice, to face the curse and end it, no matter the cost. You walk willingly, the shadow said, its voice resonating through the stillness. Few do. I don't have a choice, Layla replied, her voice steady, despite the fear bubbling in her chest. The shadow turned slightly, its hollow eyes catching the moonlight. You always have a choice. That is the power of the vow, and its greatest weakness. The clearing. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a circular clearing bathed in pale moonlight. At the center stood a stone altar, weathered and cracked with age. Surrounding it were symbols carved into the earth, identical to those that had appeared on the ring. This is where it began, the shadow said, gesturing toward the altar. And this is where it will end. Layla approached cautiously, her heart pounding. The air was colder here, the whispers she had heard for weeks now a low hum, as though the ground itself were alive. What do I have to do? She asked. The instructions. The shadow pointed to the altar. Place the ring upon the stone. Speak the truth of the vow, and the blood that bound it. Offer the final choice. Layla frowned. The final choice? The vow was broken, the shadow explained. To undo it, there must be a new promise. A sacrifice that binds the past to the present, and the present to the future. Her stomach turned. What kind of sacrifice? The shadow didn't answer directly. One that reflects the weight of the vow. You will know when the time comes. The ritual began. Layla stepped toward the altar, her breath visible in the freezing air. She placed the ring on the cold stone, its cracked surface catching the moon. She closed her eyes, recalling the words her grandmother had spoken, the letters she had read, and the truth her parents had finally revealed. The vow was made to protect, she said aloud, her voice trembling. But it became a chain. It broke when the promise was used to control, to harm. And now it demands a price. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse in response, the symbols glowing faintly. The shadow loomed closer, its form growing larger and darker. Speak your truth, it said. Layla took a deep breath. I was promised without my choice. I was bound by a vow I didn't make. But I refused to be its prisoner anymore. The whispers rose to a crescendo, swirling around her like a storm. The ground shook, and the altar glowed with an otherworldly light. The shadow's test. The shadow extended a long, smoke-like arm toward her. In its claw-like hand, it held a second ring, identical to the one on the altar, but unbroken. You must choose, the shadow said. Take the ring and bind yourself to the vow, or leave it, and let the curse consume your bloodline. Layla's breath caught in her throat. Bind myself? To accept the vow is to take its weight willingly, the shadow explained. To leave it is to break the cycle, but the price will fall upon another. Her mind raced. If she accepted the vow, she would be tied to the shadow forever, but her family would be safe. If she refused, she could end the curse, but at an unimaginable cost. The final choice. Layla reached for the ring, her fingers brushing against its cold surface. Her mind swirled with memories, her grandmother's warnings, her parents' betrayal, the weight of the curse that had followed her for so long. She pulled her hand back, her chest heaving. No, she said firmly. I won't carry this, it ends here. The shadow recoiled slightly, its form flickering. You choose to break the vow? Layla nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. I choose freedom. The shadow paused, its hollow eyes narrowing. Then it stepped back, its form dissolving into smoke. So be it, it said. The altars collapse. The moment the shadow disappeared, the altar began to crack. The glowing symbols faded, and the whispers fell silent. The ground beneath Layla's feet trembled violently, forcing her to stumble backward. The ring on the altar disintegrated into dust, carried away by the cold wind. Layla stood alone in the clearing, the oppressive weight in the air lifting for the first time in weeks. Cliffhanger ending. As Layla turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. A figure stood at the edge of the Claringa woman, in a tattered dress, her face obscured by shadows. Layla froze, her heart pounding. The woman tilted her head, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. You think it's over? Layla blinked, and the figure was gone. The broken cycle. Layla returned home as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The house stood eerily silent, its familiar silhouette now a stark reminder of everything she had faced. Her parents were waiting in the kitchen, their faces pale and drawn. They looked up as she entered, the tension in the air so thick it felt like a living thing. Where have you been? Her father demanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. Layla placed the cracked ring on the table. It's done, she said simply. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. You mean? I broke the vow, Layla said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion weighing her down. The shadow's hold on our family is gone. But even as she said the words, a gnawing doubt lingered in her mind. The calm before the storm. For the first time in weeks, the house felt normal. The oppressive weight that had clung to the walls was gone, and the whispers no longer haunted Layla's nights. Her parents, though visibly shaken, seemed relieved. They moved about the house with tentative optimism, as though afraid to fully believe the nightmare was over. But Layla couldn't shake the memory of the woman in the clearing. The figure who had whispered, "You think it's over?" A haunting return. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 nights later. Layla woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At first, she thought it was her father, his restless pacing a common occurrence. But as she sat up in bed, she realized the footsteps were heavier, slower, and didn't follow any familiar pattern. She opened her door cautiously, peering into the dark hallway. "Hello?" she called softly. The footsteps stopped. Layla's heart pounded as she stepped into the hallway, the floorboards creaking under her weight. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and she could see her breath forming faint clouds. At the far end of the hallway, a shadow shifted. It was tall and motionless, its hollow eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "You chose freedom," the shadow said, its voice low and resonant. "But freedom has a cost. The consequences." Layla froze, her mind racing. "I broke the vow," she said, her voice trembling. "You are supposed to be gone." The shadow tilted its head, its form flickering. "The vow is broken," it said, "but the cycle is not." "What does that mean?" Layla demanded. The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it extended a hand, pointing toward the living room. Layla followed its gesture, her legs trembling. When she reached the living room, she gasped. The cracked ring was back on the coffee table, its surface glowing faintly. Her parents appeared in the doorway behind her, their faces pale with fear. "Why is it still here?" her father whispered. Layla turned to the shadow, anger bubbling in her chest. "I did what you asked. I made my choice. Why are you still here? The shadow's hollow eyes fixed on her. The choice was yours, it said. But the curse is theirs. Uncovering the truth. Layla's grandmother called the next day. Her voice urgent. You said the vow was broken, she said. But the shadow hasn't left, has it? Layla explained what had happened, her voice shaking. When she finished, her grandmother sighed heavily. The shadow's hold wasn't just on you, her grandmother said. It's tied to the entire family. Breaking the vow freed you. But the cycle can only be ended if the truth is faced by all. What truth? Layla asked, frustration creeping into her voice. The truth about the pact. Her grandmother replied. It wasn't made out of necessity. It was made out of greed. Our family bound itself to the shadow for power, for wealth. And now we're paying the price. A family divided. That evening, Layla confronted her parents again. You knew, she said, her voice trembling with anger. You knew the pact wasn't about protection. It was about power. Her father's face hardened. You don't understand, he said. It was different back then. We had no choice. Layla slammed her hand on the table, the ring clinking against the surface. Stop lying. The shadow told me the truth. Grandma told me the truth. You didn't do this to protect anyone. You did it for yourselves. Her mother began to cry, her shoulders shaking. We didn't know it would come to this, she said. We thought it was a blessing. Layla's anger gave way to exhaustion. It's not a blessing. It's a curse. And it's not over. The shadow's warning. That night, the shadow appeared again, its form larger and darker than before. It loomed over Layla's bed, its hollow eyes glowing brighter. You have freed yourself, it said. But the debt remains. The cycle will not end until the truth is paid in full. Layla sat up, her fear giving way to determination. Then tell me what to do, she said. The shadow leaned closer, its voice a low growl. The offering must be returned to its source. The pact must be broken where it began. Layla's mind raced. The clearing in the woods. The altar. She nodded slowly. I'll finish this, she said. The shadow tilted its head. Beware, child. The path to freedom is paved with sacrifice. Cliffhanger ending. The next morning, Layla stood at the edge of the woods. The cracked ring clutched tightly in her hand. The forest seemed darker than before, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Her parents stood behind her, their expressions a mixture of fear and guilt. This is where it ends, Layla said, stepping into the shadows. As she disappeared into the woods, the whispers began again, louder this time, their words a chilling reminder. You cannot break what you do not understand. The source of the curse. The forest swallowed Layla as she made her way toward the clearing. The air was heavier than before, pressing against her chest with every step. Twisted roots and overgrown branches clawed at her feet and arms, as though the woods themselves wanted to slow her progress. Behind her, her parents followed at a cautious distance, their faces pale in the dim light filtering through the trees. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of their guilt hung in the air like a tangible force. In her hand, Layla clutched the cracked ring. Its surface was colder than ice, the symbols faintly glowing in the darkness. The whispers returned, louder than ever, overlapping in chaotic murmurs that made her head throb. This is where it began, Layla whispered to herself, the shadow's words echoing in her mind. And this is where it ends. The clearing revisited. When they reached the clearing, Layla stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. The altar stood at its center, unchanged, but the surrounding air shimmered unnaturally. Symbols glowed faintly on the ground, and shadows writhed at the edges of the circle, watching silently. The shadow emerged from the trees, its form darker and more defined than ever. It towered over them, its hollow eyes burning with an intensity that made Layla's knees tremble. You have returned, it said, its voice resonating through the clearing. Layla swallowed hard. I came to finish this, to end the curse. The shadow tilted its head, its gaze shifting to her parents. The cycle cannot end without truth. Speak it, and face the cost. The truth unveiled. Layla turned to her parents, her voice trembling but firm. You have to tell the truth, all of it. Her mother clutched her father's arm, tears streaming down her face. We didn't know, we didn't think it would go this far. Stop, Layla said sharply. No more excuses, just tell the truth. Her father's shoulders slumped, and he took a deep breath. The pact wasn't made to protect the family. It was made to elevate us, to give us wealth and power. The shadow promised prosperity in exchange for loyalty through the vows, through the ring. Layla's chest tightened. And you knew what would happen if the pact was broken? Her father nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. We knew the shadow would come, but we thought we could control it. We thought we could contain the cost. The shadow's judgment. The shadow moved closer, its form blotting out the faint moonlight. The truth is spoken, it said, its voice deep and reverberating. But the cycle remains. Layla stepped forward, clutching the ring tightly. You said the offering must be returned to its source. What do I have to do? The shadow gestured toward the altar. Place the ring where it was forged. Speak the vow that binds and the vow that breaks. Layla hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She climbed onto the altar, her heart pounding in her chest, and placed the ring in the center. The final vow. The whispers grew louder, their chaotic voices filling her mind. But amid the noise, Layla focused on the shadow's instructions. The vow that binds, she said, her voice shaking. To honor and protect, to hold power at any cost. The ring glowed brightly, its surface cracking further. And the vow that breaks, she continued, tears streaming down her face. To release, to surrender, to end the cycle of greed and pain. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the shadows around the clearing surged toward the altar. The ring shattered, its pieces dissolving into light that shot upward into the night sky. The cost of freedom. Layla stumbled back as the altar cracked and crumbled, the glowing symbols fading into darkness. The shadow stood motionless, its form flickering as though caught between worlds. You have broken the vow, it said, its voice softer now. But freedom demands a price. Layla's breath hitched. What price? The shadow extended a hand toward her. The bloodline that forged the pact must end. You must choose, yourself, or them. Her parents gasped, their faces pale with fear. Layla's mind raced. She had fought so hard to break free, to save herself and her family. But now, faced with an impossible choice, the weight of her sacrifice felt unbearable. The ultimate sacrifice. Tears streamed down Layla's face as she stepped forward, her gaze meeting the shadow's hollow eyes. Take me, she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. Let them go. Let the curse end with me. Her mother screamed, rushing toward her. But the shadow raised a hand, stopping her in her tracks. You have chosen, it said. The cycle ends. The shadow enveloped Layla, its form dissolving into a swirling vortex of darkness. Her parents' cries faded into the distance as she was consumed by the void. The aftermath. When the shadows cleared, the clearing was empty. The altar was gone, and the glowing symbols had vanished. Layla's parents stood alone, their faces etched with grief and guilt. The air was still, the oppressive weight that had haunted their family for generations finally lifted. But the cost was undeniable. A haunting reminder. Back at the house, her mother found the cracked ring on the kitchen table, its surface dull and lifeless. As she held it in her trembling hands, she heard a faint whisper, Layla's voice, soft and distant. It's over now. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice breaking. She saved us. Her mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. But we'll never forgive ourselves for what it cost. Till death do us part. A haunted vow. The bride's return. Deep in the countryside, a crumbling farmhouse hides decades of secrets, and a vengeful bride who refuses to let go. For Rachel and Daniel Miller, the farmhouse is meant to be a new beginning. A chance to rebuild their strained marriage far from the chaos of the city. But from the moment they arrive, the house's oppressive silence and eerie whispers hint at a malevolent presence lurking within its walls. It begins subtly. Strange noises in the dead of night, shadows that move on their own, and a locked door in the basement that seems to call to Rachel. As her unease grows, she uncovers a chilling piece of the house's past. A tragic bride named Margaret, who made a dark vow to keep her family together, till death do us part. But Margaret's obsession twisted into something far more sinister, binding her spirit to the farmhouse, and trapping anyone who dares to disturb her domain. When Rachel finds an ancient mirror in the basement, she discovers its horrifying connection to Margaret's curse. The mirror is no ordinary object. It's a gateway, a trap fueled by jealousy and betrayal. As the mirror's influence grows, the entire farmhouse becomes an extension of Margaret's wrath, transforming into a living nightmare. Shadows creep, walls whisper, and the very air turns against the Millers. The family must confront not only the supernatural entity haunting them, but also their own fractured bonds. Armed with a cryptic journal and a tarnished wedding band, Rachel and Daniel realize the only way to escape is to shatter Margaret's hold over the house. But breaking her vow comes at a terrible cost, one that threatens to bind them to the farmhouse forever. With each passing moment, the house tightens its grip, forcing the Millers into a final confrontation with Margaret's restless spirit. As the lines between love and obsession blur, the family must decide how far they're willing to go to protect each other, and whether they can face the darkness without becoming a part of it themselves. Will they escape the house's clutches, or will they become its next eternal residence, a haunted vow? The Bride's Return is a chilling tale of betrayal, love, and the unrelenting grip of the past. Perfect for fans of atmospheric horror and psychological thrillers, this story weaves supernatural terror with deeply human fears, leaving readers questioning what lies behind the vows we make and the secrets we bury. The fresh start. The gravel driveway crunched beneath the tires of their SUV as Rachel and Daniel pulled up to the farmhouse. The house loomed ahead, its white paint weathered and peeling, the windows dark and unwelcoming. Behind it, a dense forest stretched into the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. "This is it," Daniel said, forcing a smile as he killed the engine. Rachel glanced at him, her stomach twisting. "It's remote." "That's the point," Daniel replied. "A fresh start. No distractions, no interruptions, just us." Rachel nodded, though she couldn't ignore the knot of unease forming in her chest. She stepped out of the car, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. The air smelled of damp earth and old wood, a stark contrast to the city life they had left behind. The strained atmosphere. They had come to the farmhouse as a last-ditch effort to save their marriage. After months of arguments and cold silences, it had been Daniel's idea to retreat somewhere isolated, far from the pressures of their hectic lives. "It's perfect," he'd said when he found the listing online. "Quiet, private, a place where we can really focus on us." Rachel had agreed, though part of her wondered if the silence might make things worse. As Daniel unloaded their bags, Rachel walked toward the porch, her boots creaking on the wooden steps. The door was slightly ajar, and she hesitated before pushing it open. The first look inside, the interior of the farmhouse was as rustic as the photos had promised. Hardwood floors stretched across the spacious living room, where a stone fireplace stood cold and empty. Dust motes floated in the beams of sunlight filtering through the windows. "It's got character," Daniel said, setting their bags down. Rachel ran her fingers along the edge of an old wooden table, the surface rough and splintered. "It's definitely unique." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll make it work. I know things have been hard, but this is a chance to start over." Rachel offered a small smile, though her unease lingered. The uneasy night. That evening, as they settled into the farmhouse, the silence pressed down on Rachel. She was used to the constant hum of the city, the distant wail of sirens, the chatter of neighbors, the comforting noise of life. Here, there was nothing, just the creak of the old house and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. They ate dinner in near silence, their attempts at conversation faltering under the weight of unspoken tension. By the time they climbed into bed, Rachel's nerves were frayed. As she lay in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, she heard it for the first time, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere in the house. "Did you hear that?" Rachel whispered, nudging Daniel. "Hear what?" He murmured, half asleep. "Tap, tap, tap." The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but persistent. Rachel sat up, straining to locate its source. "It's probably the pipes," Daniel mumbled, rolling over. But Rachel wasn't convinced. The sound didn't have the hollow echo of water moving through old plumbing. It was deliberate, rhythmic. She climbed out of bed, her bare feet brushing against the cold floor as she moved toward the hallway. The tapping grew louder as she approached the staircase. "Rachel," Daniel's voice was groggy. "Where are you going?" "I just need to check something," she said, gripping the banister. The locked door. At the base of the stairs, Rachel noticed a door she hadn't paid attention to earlier. It was small and unassuming, tucked beneath the staircase. The tapping was louder now, coming from behind it. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice trembling. No response. Rachel reached for the doorknob, but it didn't budge. It was locked. The tapping stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. "Rachel, come back to bed," Daniel called from upstairs. She hesitated, her hand still on the knob, before turning and heading back up the stairs. A restless sleep. Rachel's dreams were vivid and unsettling. She saw flashes of a woman in a tattered wedding dress, her face obscured by a veil. The woman stood in the forest behind the farmhouse, her skeletal fingers clutching a bouquet of dead flowers. "You shouldn't have come here," the woman whispered, her voice echoing in Rachel's mind. When Rachel jolted awake, the bedroom was silent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. Cliffhanger ending. The next morning, Rachel found Daniel in the kitchen, staring at his reflection in the window. His face was pale, his eyes distant. "Daniel," she said softly. He didn't respond at first, as if he hadn't heard her. Then he turned slowly, a strange smile on his lips. "This place is perfect, don't you think?" he said, his voice eerily calm. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but her attention was drawn to the window. On the glass, faint and foggy, were the words, "Till death do us part." The dreams begin. Rachel stood by the sink, staring out the kitchen window at the overgrown garden behind the farmhouse. Morning sunlight dappled the ground, but the beauty of the scene did little to ease the knot of unease in her chest. The words on the glass from the previous night, "Till death do us part," were gone, wiped clean as though they'd never been there. She'd told herself it was just condensation, a trick of her tired mind, but the pit in her stomach told her otherwise. Behind her, Daniel bustled about, unusually chipper. "I think I'll get started on fixing the shed today," he said, pouring coffee into his mug. "It'll be nice to have a proper workspace again." Rachel nodded absently, her gaze still fixed on the garden. "Sure. Sounds good." Daniel paused, his cheerful demeanor faltering. "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Rachel forced a smile. "Just adjusting, I guess. It's so quiet out here." "That's the point, remember?" he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "This place is exactly what we need." Rachel didn't respond. The first nightmare. That night, Rachel tossed and turned, her sleep restless and fragmented. The dreams began as a hazy memory of their wedding day, Daniel in his tailored suit, her in her flowing white gown. The church was filled with friends and family, their faces blurred but familiar. But the scene shifted. The light dimmed, and the guests vanished, leaving Rachel alone in the aisle. The once pristine gown became tattered and blood-stained, the hem dragging through blackened dirt. A figure emerged at the altar, a bride, skeletal and decayed, her veil draped over a sunken face. In her bony hands, she clutched a bouquet of dead roses. "You took what's mine," the bride rasped, her voice echoing through the empty church. Rachel tried to scream, but no sound came. The bride stepped closer, her hollow eyes burning with fury. "Till death do us part," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss. Rachel jolted awake, her chest heaving. The room was dark, and Daniel slept soundly beside her. But the dream lingered, vivid and oppressive, as if the bride's presence hadn't fully left. The argument. The next morning, Rachel found Daniel in the living room, sorting through a box of tools. "Do you ever have weird dreams here?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Daniel shrugged. "Not really." "Why?" "Last night I dreamt about a bride," She was angry, like she was accusing me of something. Daniel chuckled, though it sounded forced. It's just stress. New place, new routine, it'll pass. Rachel frowned. I don't think it's just that. I feel like this house is. Rachel, Daniel interrupted, his tone sharper than she expected. Can we not start this again? We came here to get away from all the negativity. Let's not bring it with us. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Instead, she turned and walked out the door, frustration simmering beneath her skin. The discovered chest. That afternoon, Rachel wandered the house, trying to shake the lingering unease. Her steps took her to the attic, a dusty, low-ceilinged space filled with forgotten furniture and cobwebbed boxes. She was about to leave when a glint of metal caught her eye. A small, ornate chest tucked beneath a stack of old newspapers. Curiosity piqued, she pulled it out and opened it. Inside were photographs, letters, and a tarnished wedding band. The photographs showed a young couple, their smiles wide and genuine. Rachel recognized the farmhouse in the background. The man's face bore an uncanny resemblance to Daniel. Her heart pounded as she opened one of the letters. The handwriting was elegant, but shaky, the ink faded with age. He said he loved me. He said we'd be together forever. But he lied. He betrayed me, and now he'll never leave. The letter was signed, Margaret Holloway. Unsettling connections. Rachel sat on the attic floor. The chest's contents spread before her. As she sifted through the letters, a pattern began to emerge. Margaret's love for her husband turning to suspicion. Then fury, then madness. One letter sent a chill down Rachel's spine. The house remembers. It keeps us together, even in death. Rachel closed the chest, her hands trembling. She hurried back downstairs, clutching one of the photographs. Daniel, she called, her voice echoing through the house. He appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. What's wrong? She held up the photo. Do you recognize this man? Daniel studied it, his brow furrowing. No, should I? Rachel hesitated. He looks like you. Daniel laughed, but it sounded strained. A coincidence, that's all. There is no need to get worked up over some old photo. Cliffhanger ending. That night, Rachel lay awake, the photo tucked under her pillow. She couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's story was far from over. As she stared at the ceiling, a faint sound reached her ears. A soft, rhythmic tapping, coming from beneath the floorboards. Daniel, she whispered, nudging him awake. He groaned. What now? Do you hear that? The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Before Daniel could respond, a woman's voice echoed faintly through the room. He said we'd be together forever. Rachel froze, her breath hitching, and then the voice whispered again, closer this time, till death do us part. Number should I? Rachel hesitated. He looks like you. Daniel laughed, but it sounded strained. A coincidence, that's all. Here is no need to get worked up over some old photo. Cliffhanger ending. That night, Rachel lay awake, the photo tucked under her pillow. She couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's story was far from over. As she stared at the ceiling, a faint sound reached her ears. A soft, rhythmic tapping, coming from beneath the floorboards. Daniel, she whispered, nudging him awake. He groaned. What now? Do you hear that? The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Before Daniel could respond, a woman's voice echoed faintly through the room. He said we'd be together forever. Rachel froze, her breath hitching, and then the voice whispered again, closer this time, till death do us part. The attic chest. The faint tapping echoed in Rachel's ears long after it stopped. That night, she barely slept, haunted by the voice that seemed to come from nowhere. She couldn't ignore the uncanny resemblance between Daniel and the man in the photograph, nor the words in Margaret Holloway's letter. The house remembers. It keeps us together, even in death. Returning to the chest, dust motes floated lazily in the sunlight streaming through the attic's single window. The air was stale, carrying the faint smell of mothballs and rotting wood. Rachel knelt before the chest, her fingers brushing over its ornate carvings. The brass latch clicked open, and she lifted the lid. The contents seemed even more unsettling in the daylight. The wedding band gleamed faintly, its inscription catching her eye. Forever bound, M&R. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. M and R. She murmured. Margaret and Robert? She pulled out the stack of letters, flipping through them more carefully this time. Each one painted a clearer picture of Margaret's descent into paranoia and despair. Margaret's words. One letter stood out, its edges frayed as if it had been read and reread countless times. Rachel unfolded it, her hands trembling. He thinks I don't know, but I see the way he looks at her. She's always smiling, always laughing. He swears T here is nothing between them, but I know better. He's mine, and I won't let him leave me. Not for her, not for anyone. The letter ended abruptly, the ink smudged as though it had been written in a rush. Rachel set it aside, her mind racing. Margaret's jealousy and possessiveness were palpable. But who was her? The photographs. Rachel sifted through the photographs again, searching for clues. Most were ordinary snapshots of the couple around the farmhouse, smiling in the garden, sitting on the porch, posing in front of the fireplace. But one photo made her stomach churn. It showed Margaret and another woman, standing side by side in front of the house. The woman was younger, with soft curls and a bright, carefree smile. Rachel flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink were the words, Margaret and Lila, 1974. Lila, Rachel whispered. The name felt heavy, as if it carried some unspoken tragedy. A locked journal. Beneath the photographs, Rachel found a small leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked with age, and its edges were worn smooth. The journal was locked, the tiny brass clasp securing its secrets. Rachel searched the chest for a key but found none. Frustrated, she tucked the journal under her arm and made her way downstairs, confronting Daniel. Daniel was outside, hammering away at the sagging roof of the shed. His shirt clung to his back as he worked, the repetitive thud of the hammer echoing across the yard. Daniel, Rachel called, holding up the journal. He glanced over his shoulder, wiping sweat from his brow. What now? I found this in the attic, she said, walking closer. It belonged to Margaret. It's locked, but I think it could explain what's happening here. Daniel frowned. Rachel, you are obsessing over this. It's just an old house with old junk. There is nothing happening here. Nothing happening? Rachel snapped. Last night, I heard someone talking, and those letters. Margaret was terrified of something. Daniel sighed, setting down the hammer. We came here to fix us, not dig up the past. What if the past is part of what's wrong? Rachel countered. Daniel shook his head, his jaw tightening. I think you are reading too much into this. Just let it go. The journal's secret. That evening, while Daniel showered, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with the journal. She fiddled with the clasp, searching for a way to open it. Her eyes landed on the wedding band from the chest. On a hunch, she slipped the band into the clasp, twisting it gently. The mechanism clicked, and the journal fell open. Rachel's breath hitched as she flipped through the pages. The handwriting matched Margaret's letters, but the entries were far more frantic, the words scrawled in uneven lines. One passage sent chills down her spine. The mirror in the basement shows me things I don't want to see. It knows my fears, my doubts, my weaknesses, and now it knows his. It whispers to him, filling his head with lies, but I won't let it take him from me. He's mine, and he always will be. Rachel read the passage over and over, the words etching themselves into her mind. The mirror in the basement. She hadn't ventured into the basement yet, but she knew she had to. Whatever was happening in the house, whatever had consumed Margaret, seemed to be tied to that mirror. The mirror's revelation. That night, Rachel stood at the top of the basement stairs, clutching a flashlight. The air was colder here, the shadows darker. Daniel, she said behind her, his voice uneasy. She glanced back at him, her resolve hardening. I have to. The stairs creaked as she descended, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The basement smelled of damp earth and mildew, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly. At the far end of the room, her flashlight landed on an ornate mirror leaning against the wall. Its frame was intricate, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. As Rachel stepped closer, her reflection began to change. The face staring back at her wasn't her own. It was Margaret's. The mirror in the basement. The basement was colder than Rachel expected. Each step down the creaky wooden staircase filling her with a sense of foreboding. The air smelled of damp earth and mildew, and the dim light from her flashlight barely pierced the thick darkness. At the far end of the room, leaning against the stone wall, stood the mirror. Its frame was elaborate, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the flickering light. Symbols Rachel didn't recognize were etched into the metal, their shapes jagged and unnerving. As she stepped closer, the beam of her flashlight landed on the glass. For a moment, it reflected nothing but her own pale face and wide, fearful eyes. But then, her reflection began to change. A haunting reflection. Rachel froze as the image in the mirror shifted. Her features blurred, replaced by another face, Margaret's. Her sunken eyes burned with fury, and her lips moved, though no sound came. Rachel. Daniel's voice broke the silence, echoing down the stairs. She turned, her heart racing. What? Come back up here, he called, his voice tense. You shouldn't be down there. Rachel hesitated, glancing back at the mirror. Margaret's face was gone, replaced once again by her own. But something about her reflection looked wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her expression distant. Rachel, please. Daniel's voice was closer now, filled with urgency. Reluctantly, she tore her gaze away and hurried back up the stairs. Tensions rise. What were you thinking? Daniel demanded, as she reached the top. I needed to see it. Rachel replied, brushing past him. See what? The mirror, she said. It's not normal, Daniel. There's something alive about it. Here's something alive about it. Daniel's expression darkened. You are letting this place get to you. It's an old house with old junk, that's all. Rachel glared at him. You didn't see what I saw. And I don't want to. Daniel snapped. Whatever you think is happening, you are feeding into it. Rachel clenched her fists, anger and fear bubbling inside her. Why won't you believe me? Because it's not real. Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the house. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. The mirror's influence. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The image of Margaret's face in the mirror appeared in her mind, and every sound in the house set her on edge. She sat by the window, staring out at the moonlit garden. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Daniel, she called softly. No response. She got up and peeked into the hallway, her heart pounding. The footsteps continued, heading toward the basement. Rachel followed cautiously, her bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. She stopped at the top of the stairs, her breath hitching as she saw Daniel standing at the bottom, staring at the mirror. Daniel, she whispered. He didn't move. A disturbing conversation. Rachel descended the stairs slowly, her pulse quickening with each step. When she reached the bottom, she placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. What are you doing? He turned to her, his face blank. It's beautiful, isn't it? Rachel stared at him, her blood running cold. What? The mirror, he said, his voice distant. It shows you the truth. It shows you everything. Daniel, you are scaring me, Rachel said, gripping his arm. He pulled away, his eyes fixed on the glass. Margaret was right. This house, it keeps us together, forever. Rachel's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and touched the mirror's surface. The symbols on the frame glowed faintly, and for a moment, Rachel thought she heard whispers emanating from the glass. Daniel, stop! She cried, pulling him away. The moment his hand left the mirror, he blinked, his expression shifting to one of confusion. Rachel, what's going on? She trailed off, her voice trembling. You don't remember? He shook his head, looking genuinely baffled, a warning from the past. The next day, Rachel returned to the attic, determined to find more answers. She sifted through the letters and photographs again, searching for any mention of the mirror. One letter stood out, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. The mirror speaks to him now. It tells him lies, fills his head with promises of eternity. I tried to move it, to hide it, but it always returns to the basement. It belongs to the house, and the house belongs to it. If he doesn't leave, then neither will I. Rachel's hands shook as she read the final line. It's not a mirror. It's a gate. The gate's power. That night, Rachel confronted Daniel with the letter. This is what Margaret wrote, she said, thrusting the paper at him. She was talking about the mirror. It's not just some old decoration, it's dangerous. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Rachel, you are spiraling. No, I am not. She snapped. You've felt it too, haven't you? The pull, the whispers. It's trying to keep us here. Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting to the basement door. Even if that's true, what do we do about it? Rachel stared at him, her resolve hardening. We destroy it. Cliffhanger ending. In the dead of night, Rachel and Daniel descended into the basement, armed with a sledgehammer and a crowbar. The mirror stood against the wall, its surface gleaming despite the darkness. Rachel gripped the sledgehammer tightly, her knuckles white. This ends now, she said, but as she raised the hammer, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and a voice echoed through the room. A woman's voice, cold and venomous. You can't break what binds you. Rachel froze, her reflection in the glass replaced once again by Margaret's furious gaze. Rachel! Daniel shouted, but before she could react, the mirror began to glow, and the room was plunged into darkness. The whispering house, the darkness that engulfed the basement was absolute. Rachel's hand tightened around the sledgehammer as she strained to see, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Beside her, Daniel fumbled for the flashlight he had brought, its faint click echoing in the oppressive silence. Rachel, he whispered, his voice trembling. Are you still there? I am here, she replied, though her voice wavered. Suddenly, a soft glow emanated from the mirror, illuminating the room in an eerie, silvery light. The surface rippled like water, and shapes began to form, shadowy figures moving just beneath the glass. You can't break what binds you, the voice from the mirror repeated, colder and sharper this time. Rachel felt the air shift around her, growing heavier, denser. It wasn't just the mirror anymore. The entire basement seemed alive. The house awakens. The first sign was the sound, a faint, rhythmic creaking, like footsteps moving across the floorboards above. Then came the whispers. They started softly, barely audible, but quickly grew louder, filling every corner with the room. Rachel turned to Daniel, her eyes wide. Do you hear that? He nodded, his face pale. It's coming from everywhere. The walls groaned, the old wooden beams protesting as though under immense pressure. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the temperature plummeted. We need to get out of here, Daniel said, grabbing Rachel's arm. As they turned toward the stairs, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Trap. Rachel pounded on the door, shouting for help, but her voice was drowned out by the cacophony of whispers. They won't let us leave, she said, panic rising in her chest. Daniel scanned the room, his eyes landing on the mirror. It's that thing, he said, his voice laced with anger. It's controlling everything. Before Rachel could respond, the whispers coalesced into a single guttural voice. The house is ours. You are ours. The light from the mirror flared, and the basement walls began to shift. The cracks in the stone expanded, revealing dark voids that pulsed like living tissue. The entity takes hold. As Rachel and Daniel backed away from the walls, the voids began to ooze a thick, black substance that dripped onto the floor and spread like ink. The shapes in the mirror grew clearer, shadowy figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes, their movements jerky and unnatural. One of the figures stepped forward, pressing its hand against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled, and then the hand broke through, its fingers clawing at the air. Rachel, move, Daniel shouted, pulling her back as the figure began to emerge fully from the mirror. A house of whispers. Upstairs, Emily and Noah were jolted awake by the sound of splintering wood. The walls of their bedroom trembled, the paint peeling away to reveal the same glowing symbols Rachel had seen in the basement. Mom, Emily screamed, clutching her brother. The whispers were louder now, filling the entire house with their sinister chant. The children huddled together as the temperature dropped, their breath visible in the icy air. Emily's gaze darted to the window, but it was covered in frost, the glass cracking under the pressure. She turned to Noah, her voice shaking. "We have to find them." The mirror's reach. In the basement, Rachel swung the sledgehammer at the mirror, but the weapon stopped inches from the glass, as if an invisible force had blocked it. "It won't let me," she said, her voice filled with frustration. Daniel grabbed the crowbar and tried to pry the mirror from the wall, but the more he struggled, the louder the whispers became. "You will stay," the voice hissed. "Forever bound." The shadowy figure stepped fully out of the mirror, its form towering over them. It reached for Daniel, its fingers elongating unnaturally. "Run!" Rachel shouted, pulling him away. The house fights back. As they scrambled up the stairs, the basement walls seemed to close in, the dark voids oozing more of the black substance. The stairs themselves warped beneath their feet, each step creaking ominously. When they reached the top, the door flew open on its own, and they stumbled into the hallway. But the house was no longer the same. The walls pulsed with a faint glow, and the whispers followed them, growing louder and more frantic. The furniture in the living room shifted, sliding across the floor as if alive. "Mom, Dad," Emily's voice rang out, and Rachel turned to see her children running toward them. The family reunited. Rachel knelt and pulled Emily and Noah into her arms, relief flooding her. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "The house, it's trying to keep us here." Rachel looked at Daniel, her jaw tightening. "We have to end this. We have to destroy the mirror. It's too strong," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "We can't even touch it." "We don't have a choice," Rachel replied. "If we don't stop it, we'll never leave." Cliffhanger ending. As the family moved toward the front door, it slammed shut with a resounding boom. The shadows from the basement began to seep up through the floorboards, snaking their way toward the family. Rachel turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with determination. "Take the kids outside, I'll handle the mirror." "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "We do this together." Before Rachel could respond, the voice from the mirror echoed through the house, louder and more menacing than ever. "You cannot escape. You belong to us now." The light from the mirror flared again, and the house groaned, as if alive and preparing to swallow them whole. The bride's vow. The house groaned around them, the walls seeming to pulse with a life of their own. Shadows danced across the warped floorboards, and the oppressive whispers never ceased. Rachel clutched Emily and Noah close, her mind racing. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to figure out why this is happening. The mirror, Margaret, the house, it's all connected." Daniel nodded, his face pale but resolute. "There is still the journal. Maybe it has the answers we need." Returning to the journal, the family huddled in the living room, the air heavy with tension. Rachel retrieved Margaret's journal from the kitchen table, its cracked leather cover cool against her palms. She flipped through the pages, her breath hitching as she read Margaret's desperate words. "He promised me forever. He said we'd grow old together in this house. But he lied. He betrayed me." Rachel's fingers trembled as she turned to the next entry, written in a jagged, hurried scrawl. "Lila. It's always Lila. She thinks she can take him from me. But this house will not let her. The house keeps us together. Forever. Lila." Rachel murmured. "She's the key. The truth about Lila." Daniel leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. "Lila? Who is she?" Rachel retrieved the photograph she'd found in the attic, the one showing Margaret and Lila standing in front of the farmhouse. She handed it to Daniel, pointing to the back where the date and names were scrawled. "This is Lila," Rachel said. "Margaret's friend, or at least, she was. But Margaret thought something was going on between her and Robert." Daniel frowned. "And you think the mirror has something to do with that?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "But look at this." She turned to another journal entry. "I saw them together in the mirror. I saw the way he looked at her. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows me the truth. And now it will make sure they can never leave me." Daniel exhaled sharply. "She used the mirror to trap them here." "The bride's vow," The next entry sent chills down Rachel's spine. I made a vow. Till death do us part. And death is not the end. If I can't have him, no one will. This house will keep us together, bound to each other forever. Rachel's voice trembled as she read the words aloud. She didn't just trap Lila and Robert. She made herself part of this curse. Emily, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Is that why we keep hearing her? Why she's in the mirror? Rachel nodded, her throat tightening. I think so. Margaret's jealousy and hatred tied her to the house, and the mirror is how she keeps control. The house's purpose. Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. So, what do we do? If she's bound to the mirror, do we destroy it? Rachel hesitated, glancing at the journal. Maybe. But what if destroying it makes things worse? If the mirror is holding her here, breaking it might unleash her completely. The thought sent a shiver through the room. A message from the past. As they debated their next move, the whispers in the house grew louder, the voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Then, as suddenly as they began, the whispers stopped, replaced by a single voice. Margaret's voice. You can't take him from me. None of you can. The lights flickered, and the walls creaked. A cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of roses and decay. Mom, Emily whispered, pointing to the mirror leaning against the basement wall. Rachel followed her gaze. In the mirror's surface, Margaret's reflection appeared, her veil tattered and her eyes burning with fury. She stared at Rachel, her lips moving silently, the bride's warning. Rachel moved closer to the mirror, her pulse quickening. What do you want? She demanded. Margaret's reflection tilted its head, her hollow eyes narrowing. Her voice filled the room, cold and venomous. Leave. Or be bound like the rest. Rachel took a step back, her legs trembling. What do you mean? Why are you doing this? Margaret's gaze shifted to Daniel, and her expression darkened. He looks just like him. He will stay. You all will stay. A desperate plan. Rachel turned to Daniel, panic rising in her chest. We can't let her keep us here. We have to end this. Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. But how? Destroying the mirror could make it worse. And if we stay, she'll take us. Rachel glanced at the journal, her mind racing. Margaret wrote that the house keeps them together. Maybe there is a way to break the connection. Untie her from the house and the mirror. But how? Daniel asked. Rachel's gaze fell to the wedding band she'd found in the attic chest. It's part of the vow she made. Maybe it can undo what she's done. Cliffhanger. Armed with the journal and the wedding band, Rachel and Daniel prepared to confront the mirror one final time. The whispers in the house grew louder, more aggressive, as if sensing their intent. The family stood together at the top of the basement stairs, their breaths visible in the icy air. Are you ready? Daniel asked, his voice steady but low. Rachel nodded, clutching the wedding band tightly. We have to be. As they descended into the darkness, the mirror began to glow, its surface rippling like water. Margaret's voice echoed around them, her tone laced with rage and desperation. Asterisk. You will never leave. You belong to me now. Asterisk. The basement door slammed shut behind them, plunging the house into silence. The mirror's power. The basement was a living nightmare. The moment the door slammed shut, the air thickened, carrying a coldness that chilled Rachel to her core. The mirror's surface glowed faintly, its frame pulsating with an unnatural light. Shadows danced across the walls, shifting and twisting like they had a mind of their own. Daniel gripped the crowbar tightly, his knuckles white. Stay close to me, he said, his voice steady despite the fear flickering in his eyes. Rachel nodded, clutching the wedding band, and Margaret's journal in her trembling hands. Emily and Noah huddled behind her, their small faces pale with fear. The whispers started again, low and rhythmic, growing louder with each passing second. They overlapped into a chaotic chant that filled the room, their words unintelligible but unmistakably angry. We shouldn't have come down here, Rachel thought, her stomach twisting in dread. The shadows take form. As the family moved cautiously toward the mirror, the shadows began to coalesce. Dark figures emerged from the corners of the basement, their elongated limbs and hollow eyes making them appear almost human. But not quite. One by one, the figures surrounded the family, their movements slow and deliberate. "Rachel," Daniel whispered, glancing around. "What do we do?" Rachel's mind raced. "We stick to the plan," she said, though her voice trembled. "The wedding band and the journal, they're connected to Margaret's vow. We have to use them." The mirror speaks. The mirror's glow intensified, and Margaret's reflection appeared once more, her hollow eyes burning with rage. "You think you can take them from me?" she hissed, her voice reverberating through the room. "You don't understand. This house is mine. The mirror is mine. They are mine." Rachel stepped forward, holding up the wedding band. "This isn't yours anymore, Margaret. You can't keep us here." Margaret's laugh was cold and sharp. "You don't know what you've done, do you? You've brought them to me. The house has chosen you. You belong to it now." The mirror's pull. Suddenly, the glow from the mirror surged, and a powerful force pulled at the family. Rachel stumbled forward, her grip on the wedding band slipping. Daniel grabbed her arm, steadying her as Emily and Noah clung to each other. The pull grew stronger, and Rachel realized with horror that the mirror was trying to draw them in. "It's the gate," she whispered. "She's using it to trap us. We're not going anywhere," Daniel said through gritted teeth, planting his feet firmly on the ground. But the shadows moved closer, their hollow eyes fixed on the children. Emily's warning. "Mom," Emily cried, pointing at the shadows. "They're reaching for Noah." Rachel turned just in time to see one of the figures extend its long, claw-like fingers toward her son. Without thinking, she lunged forward, pulling Noah into her arms. The shadow recoiled, but its hollow gaze didn't waver. "They want us," Emily said, her voice trembling. "They want to keep us here." Rachel's heart pounded as she looked back at the mirror. Margaret's reflection smirked, her face a mask of malice. The journal's revelation. Rachel fumbled with the journal, flipping through its pages in search of something, anything, that might help. Her eyes landed on a passage she hadn't noticed before. "The mirror is the gate. Noise binds it, but love unbinds it. A vow kept can undo a vow broken. Only then will the way be closed. Noise binds it, but love unbinds it." Rachel muttered, the words echoing in her mind. "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. Rachel held up the wedding band. "This ring, it's tied to her vow. She made it out of jealousy and hatred. But if we show her something stronger, maybe we can break it." Confronting Margaret, Rachel stepped closer to the mirror, ignoring the shadows pressing in around her. She held the wedding band in one hand and the journal in the other, her voice steady as she spoke. "Margaret, your vow was born out of anger and betrayal, but it doesn't have to end that way." Margaret's reflection sneered. "You think you understand? You think love can undo what I've done?" Rachel nodded, her voice firm. "I do, and I am not afraid of you." The shadows froze, their hollow eyes fixed on Rachel. The whispers faltered, replaced by an eerie silence. The wedding band's power. Rachel pressed the wedding band against the mirror's surface, and the glass rippled like water. The symbols on the frame flared, their light growing brighter until it filled the entire basement. Margaret's reflection screamed, her voice filled with rage and despair. "No, you can't take him from me." But the glow from the mirror intensified, and the shadows began to dissolve, their forms unraveling like smoke. The pull from the mirror weakened, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. Rachel felt a surge of hope as the whispers faded into silence. Cliffhanger ending. As the light from the mirror dimmed, Margaret's reflection stared at Rachel one last time, her hollow eyes filled with a mix of fury and sorrow. "This isn't over," she whispered, her voice faint but chilling. "The house remembers. It always remembers." The mirror's glow flickered once more before fading completely. The basement fell silent, the oppressive cold replaced by a strange stillness. Rachel turned to Daniel, her heart racing. "Did we do it?" Before he could answer, a faint tapping sound came from behind them. Rachel spun around, her blood running cold as she saw it. A crack forming in the mirror's surface, pulsing faintly with light. The struggle for freedom. The crack in the mirror pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum that seemed to resonate with the very walls of the basement. Rachel stared at it, her heart pounding. The oppressive cold had lifted, but the air remained thick with a sense of foreboding. "We need to leave," Daniel said, his voice low and urgent. He picked up Emily and gestured for Noah to follow. "Now," Rachel nodded, clutching the journal and wedding band tightly. "It's not over yet," she whispered, her gaze lingering on the mirror. The family scrambled up the basement stairs, the old wood groaning beneath their feet. As they reached the top, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing the basement in darkness once more. The house fights back. The moment they stepped into the hallway, the whispers returned, louder and more frantic. The walls pulsed as though alive, the glowing symbols reappearing in jagged lines that seemed to spread like veins. Rachel felt the house shifting beneath her feet, the floorboards bending and twisting. "Don't stop," she urged. "Just keep moving." They ran toward the front door, but it wouldn't open. The handle wouldn't turn, and the door itself seemed fused to the frame. "Back door," Daniel shouted, leading them toward the kitchen. The kitchen trap. The kitchen was a chaotic mess. The cabinets banged open and shut on their own, and the old appliances hummed with unnatural energy. The shadows gathered in the corners, their forms shifting and writhing. Rachel's stomach dropped as she realized the back door was no better than the front. It was sealed, the glass frosted over with an unearthly cold. "Mom, what do we do?" Emily cried, clutching Rachel's arm. Rachel scanned the room, her mind racing. "Upstairs," she said finally. "There is a window in the kids' room. We can break it." The ascent. The family raced up the stairs, the whispers following them like a relentless tide. The walls seemed to close in, the symbols glowing brighter as they climbed. When they reached the children's bedroom, Rachel and Daniel pushed the dresser against the door, creating a makeshift barricade. "Daniel, break the window," Rachel said, her voice shaking. Daniel grabbed a chair and swung it against the glass, but the window didn't shatter. Instead, it cracked faintly, emitting a strange, hollow sound. "It's like the mirror," Daniel said, his face pale. Rachel's breath hitched. "It's the house. It's all connected." A last-ditch effort. Rachel opened the journal, flipping through the pages frantically. There has to be something here, a way to weaken it. Her eyes landed on a passage that sent a chill down her spine. "The house binds what is broken. A vow unbroken will shatter the chain." "What does it mean?" Daniel asked. Rachel turned the wedding band over in her hands. "This ring, it's tied to her vow. She made it out of jealousy and hatred, but if we show her something stronger, maybe we can break it." "You think that'll work?" Daniel asked. Rachel nodded. "We have to try." The vow. Rachel and Daniel stood in the center of the room, the children huddled behind them. Rachel held the wedding band tightly, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Margaret," she shouted, her voice echoing through the house. "You wanted to keep your family together, but you did it the wrong way. Let us go, and we'll honor your vow the right way." The whispers faltered, and for a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. Daniel took Rachel's hand, his voice calm and firm. "We vow to protect our family, to face everything together, no matter what." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Till death do us part." The house's fury. The house roared, the symbols on the walls flaring brighter than ever. The floorboards buckled, and the shadows surged forward, their hollow eyes fixed on the family. Rachel pressed the wedding band against the glowing symbol nearest her, and the effect was immediate. The light dimmed, and the shadows recoiled, their forms unraveling like smoke. "It's working," Emily cried. "Do it again," Daniel shouted. Rachel moved to another symbol, pressing the ring against it. One by one, the symbols dimmed, and the whispers faded into silence. The mirrors collapsed. A loud crack echoed through the house, followed by another and another. The family froze as the sound of shattering glass filled the air. "The mirror," Rachel whispered. The house groaned, its very foundation trembling. The glowing symbols disappeared completely, and the oppressive presence that had gripped the farmhouse lifted. The front door swung open on its own, letting in a rush of fresh, cool air. "Go," Rachel urged, grabbing Emily and Noah. Cliffhanger, ending. As the family ran outside, the house stood eerily still behind them. The windows were dark, and the whispers were gone. But as they reached the edge of the driveway, Rachel glanced back and froze. In the attic window, she saw a figure, a woman in a tattered wedding dress, her hollow eyes fixed on Rachel, Margaret. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. The final crossing, the fresh air outside the farmhouse, was a stark contrast to the suffocating tension that had consumed them inside. Rachel held Emily's hand tightly, her heart racing as she looked back at the ominous silhouette of the house. The windows were dark and lifeless, but she knew better than to trust its apparent stillness. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "We need to leave, now." Rachel nodded, her gaze fixed on the attic window where she had seen Margaret's spectral form. "But it's not over," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" "We got out." Rachel turned to him, her voice steady but grim. "Margaret's still there, and as long as she's tied to that mirror, the house isn't done with us." A haunting decision. The family piled into their SUV, the engine roaring to life. As Daniel backed out of the driveway, the whispers began again, faint at first, then growing louder. "Do you hear that?" Emily whispered, clutching Noah's hand in the back seat. Rachel's stomach twisted. The whispers weren't coming from the house. They were inside the car. She glanced at the rearview mirror and gasped. Margaret's reflection stared back at her, her hollow eyes filled with fury. "You can't leave," Margaret's voice hissed, filling the car. "You belong to the house." The return. The car's engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded at the edge of the property. Daniel tried to restart it, but the engine refused to turn over. "Rachel," he said, his voice taut with fear, "what do we do?" Rachel swallowed hard, her grip tightening on the journal and wedding band. "We have to go back." Daniel stared at her, incredulous. "Back? Are you insane? She's not going to let us leave until we break the connection," Rachel said, her voice firm. "The mirror is the key. If we don't destroy it, she'll keep coming for us." The final approach. Reluctantly, the family trudged back toward the farmhouse. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a malevolent wind. As they reached the front porch, the door creaked open on its own, revealing the dark, yawning void of the entryway. "Stay close," Rachel said, her voice trembling but determined. The family stepped inside, the oppressive atmosphere wrapping around them like a shroud. The house groaned in protest, its walls pulsing faintly as though alive. Facing Margaret, the basement door was wide open, the mirror's faint glow casting eerie shadows up the staircase. "She's waiting for us," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. They descended slowly, the stairs creaking under their weight. As they reached the bottom, the mirror flared to life, its surface rippling like water. Margaret's reflection appeared, her tattered wedding dress billowing as though caught in a phantom wind. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice cold and venomous. "We're not afraid of you," Rachel replied, stepping forward. "This ends now. The battle begins." Margaret's hollow eyes narrowed, and the shadows in the basement began to shift and writhe. Figures emerged from the walls, their elongated limbs reaching for the family. Daniel swung the crowbar, driving one of the figures back. "Rachel, whatever you are going to do it now." Rachel clutched the wedding band tightly, her mind racing. She opened the journal, her eyes scanning the frantic entries for the passage that had stuck with her. "Noise binds it, but love unbinds it. A vow kept can undo a vow broken." "Margaret," Rachel called, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "You made a vow to keep your family together, but it was born out of anger and jealousy. We're making a new vow, one that will break yours. The vow of freedom." Rachel held the wedding band high, her voice filled with determination. "We vow to protect our family, to face every challenge together, no matter what. Love, not hatred, binds us." The mirror's glow dimmed slightly, and Margaret's reflection faltered. "You think that will stop me?" she hissed. Daniel stepped beside Rachel, his voice firm. "Your vow was broken, Margaret. Ours won't be." Emily and Noah joined their parents, their small voices trembling but resolute, as they echoed the vow. "Till death do us part." The mirrors collapse. The mirror began to crack, the fractures spreading across its surface like a spiderweb. The shadows recoiled, their forms disintegrating as the mirror's light pulsed erratically. Margaret's reflection screamed, her voice filled with rage and despair. "No, you can't take them from me." The final crack split the mirror in two, and a blinding light filled the basement. The house groaned violently, its very foundation trembling. Rachel shielded her eyes as the light consumed everything, and then, silence, the aftermath. When Rachel opened her eyes, the basement was still. The mirror lay shattered on the floor, its ornate frame twisted and blackened. The oppressive cold was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. "Is it over?" Emily whispered, clutching Rachel's arm. Rachel nodded, though her voice was heavy with emotion. "I think so." The family made their way upstairs, the house eerily quiet. As they stepped outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the farmhouse in golden light. Cliffhanger ending. As they walked toward the car, Rachel glanced back at the farmhouse one last time. The windows were dark, and the whispers were gone. But as they drove away, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. In the attic window, a faint silhouette appeared. A woman in a tattered wedding dress, her hollow eyes fixed on the retreating car. The shattered vow. The drive away from the farmhouse was silent, the weight of the past few days pressing down on the Millers like a heavy shroud. The rising sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and pink, but its beauty felt distant, unreachable. Emily sat with her knees tucked to her chest, her wide eyes staring out the window. Noah leaned against her, his small hands clutching her arm. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white, while Rachel sat in the passenger seat, the broken wedding band clenched in her palm. "Are we free now?" Emily's voice broke the silence, tentative and trembling. Rachel exchanged a glance with Daniel. "We're safe," she said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. The uneasy calm. The family stopped at a small roadside diner several miles from the farmhouse. The comforting smells of coffee and bacon filled the air, but the tension between them remained unbroken. Daniel sipped his coffee in silence, his gaze fixed on the window, as if expecting to see the farmhouse looming in the distance. Rachel absently stirred her tea, her mind replaying the events of the past few days. The mirror, the shadows, Margaret's wrath, it all felt like a dream, but the weight in her chest reminded her it was real. "I keep thinking about her," Rachel said finally, her voice low. Daniel looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Margaret?" Rachel nodded. She wasn't evil. She was hurt, betrayed. She let her pain consume her, and it turned her into something unnatural. Emily glanced up from her plate, her voice small. "Do you think she's gone?" Rachel hesitated, her fingers tightening around the wedding band. "I don't know." Unsettling signs. As the family continued their journey, subtle signs began to unsettle Rachel. The whispers were gone, but there was an eerie stillness in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, and Rachel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, as they settled into a motel room, Rachel was startled awake by a faint tapping at the window. Her heart raced as she sat up, her gaze darting toward the sound, but there was nothing there. Just the wind brushing against the glass. The wedding band's influence. Rachel couldn't bring herself to let go of the wedding band. It felt cold and heavy in her hand, as though it still carried a piece of Margaret's lingering presence. As she stared at it, a memory surfaced. Margaret's final words before the mirror shattered. "The house remembers. It always remembers." "Rachel?" Daniel's voice broke her thoughts. He sat beside her, his expression weary. "You are still thinking about it, aren't you?" "How can I not?" Rachel whispered. "Even if we destroyed the mirror, the house, Margaret, it's still a part of us now." Daniel placed a hand on hers, his voice firm but gentle. "We made it out. We're alive, that's what matters." An ominous return. The next morning, as the family prepared to leave the motel, Emily found a folded piece of paper slipped under the door. Rachel unfolded it, her breath catching as she read the words scrawled in jagged handwriting. "You broke the mirror, but you didn't break me." She dropped the note, her hands trembling. Daniel picked it up, his face darkening as he read it. "This has to be a prank," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No one knew where we were staying," Rachel replied, her voice tight. The lingering shadows. As they drove farther from the farmhouse, the unease only deepened. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of their vision, and Rachel could swear she heard faint whispers on the wind. That night, as they stopped at another motel, Rachel woke to find Emily standing at the window, staring out into the darkness. "Emily," Rachel called softly, getting out of bed. Emily turned slowly, her face pale. "I saw her," she whispered. Rachel's blood ran cold. "Who?" "The bride," Emily said. "She was in the parking lot, watching us." The shattered vow. Rachel sat with Emily until she fell back asleep, but her own thoughts kept her awake. Margaret's vow had been shattered, but the consequences of breaking it weren't as simple as she had hoped. The house's grip might have been weakened, but it hadn't let them go entirely. Rachel turned the wedding band over in her hand, the weight of its history pressing down on her. She realized the truth. They hadn't escaped Margaret's reach. They had carried a piece of her with them. A new beginning? Days turned into weeks, and life began to regain a semblance of normalcy. The family moved into a new home, far from the farmhouse, far from its horrors. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. She often caught glimpses of movement in the corners of her vision or heard faint whispers when the house was quiet. One evening, as she unpacked a box, she found the wedding band tucked inside, though she was certain she had left it behind. Her hand trembled as she held it, the faint sound of tapping echoing through the room. Final twist. That night, Rachel awoke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She sat up, her heart pounding as she listened. The door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped into the room. It was Margaret, her tattered wedding dress billowing as if caught in an invisible wind. "You made a vow," Margaret whispered, her hollow eyes fixed on Rachel. "And I intend to keep it." The room plunged into darkness, and the last thing Rachel heard was the faint sound of tapping on the glass. A family retreat. The air smelled of pine and the sharp, clean scent of snowmelt as Sarah Miller rolled down her car window, taking in the winding mountain road ahead. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of trees, casting shifting patterns on the asphalt. Almost there. She called over her shoulder to her two kids, Emily and Noah, who were slumped in their seats, scrolling through their phones. Her husband, Tom, glanced at her from the passenger seat, his face a mix of excitement and mild exhaustion. "Think this place lives up to the reviews?" he asked, fiddling with the map on his phone. Sarah smiled. "Rustic charm, stunning views, and a perfect retreat from the chaos of modern life. Sounds like just what we need." The family had planned the trip as a way to reconnect, to escape the monotony of city living and the stresses of their busy schedules. The Sunset Lodge promised a blend of nature and tranquility, perched in the heart of a secluded mountain valley. The lodge's first impression. The Sunset Lodge emerged around the next bend, a sprawling, weathered structure nestled against the hillside. Its exterior was a mix of dark wood and stone, with an arched entrance framed by climbing ivy. "Wow," Emily said, peeking out from behind her phone. "It's old." "Charming," Tom corrected, though Sarah caught the hint of hesitation in his voice. The lodge's parking lot was nearly empty, save for a handful of cars. As the family unloaded their luggage, a chilly breeze swept through the lot, carrying with it the faint creak of a wooden sign swinging overhead. "Welcome to Sunset Lodge," it read in fading letters. Beneath it was the lodge's slogan, "Your home away from home." The check-in. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, with beams of sunlight struggling to penetrate the heavy drapes covering the tall windows. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the scent of aged wood and wax polish filled the air. A woman in her late 50s greeted them from behind the reception desk. Her name tag read, Marjorie. "Welcome to Sunset Lodge," she said, her tone warm but oddly subdued. "You're staying in room 213. Here's your key." She handed Sarah a brass key attached to a leather fob. "No key cards," Emily muttered under her breath. "It's part of the rustic experience," Tom replied with a wink. Marjorie's smile faltered. "Room 213 is one of our finest. You'll find it's very quiet." Something about her hesitation made Sarah pause. "Is there a problem with the room?" Marjorie shook her head quickly. "Oh no, it's just an older building. Some guests find the creaks unsettling at first." Room 213. The walk to room 213 took them down a long, dimly lit corridor. The carpet, once plush, was now threadbare in spots, and the faint smell of dampness lingered in the air. When Sarah unlocked the door and pushed it open, a rush of cool air greeted them. The room was spacious, with 2 queen beds, a small sitting area, and a picture window offering a stunning view of the valley below. "Well, this is cozy," Tom said, setting down the bags. Emily flopped onto one of the beds, scrolling on her phone. "Do we even get Wi-Fi here?" "Not the point of this trip," Sarah said, moving to the window. She stared out at the mountains, their peaks tinged with the golden light of the setting sun. But as her gaze shifted, she noticed something odd about the window. The glass wasn't perfectly clear, it seemed to warp the view slightly, as though it was older than the rest of the room. "Mom, check this out," Noah called, pulling her attention to the small desk in the corner. A single guest book sat on its surface, its leather cover cracked with age. Sarah flipped through it, smiling at the comments left by previous visitors. "Beautiful stay. The view is amazing. Ah, a perfect escape." But toward the back, the entries changed. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, one read, "Don't stay in room 213. Don't listen to the whispers." The first night, the family settled in, their laughter and chatter filling the room as they played board games and reminisced about past vacations. For a moment, the unease Sarah had felt melted away. By the time they went to bed, the lodge was silent. Too silent. Sarah lay awake, staring at the warped window as moonlight spilled across the floor. She was just starting to drift off when she heard it, a faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window. She sat up, her heart pounding. The room was still, the shadows stretching unnaturally long across the walls. "Tom," she whispered, shaking him awake. "What is it?" He murmured groggily. "Do you hear that?" He listened for a moment, then shook his head. "It's probably just the wind. Go back to sleep." Sarah lay back down, but the tapping continued, irregular and insistent. She told herself it was nothing, but as she closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was outside, watching. Cliffhanger ending. The next morning, Sarah woke to find frost clinging to the inside of the window pane. Though the room was warm, she traced a finger over the frost, her breath catching as she noticed something etched into the glass. "Leave." She turned to wake Tom, but he was already up, standing in front of the desk, staring at the guest book. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling, "you need to see this." She approached and froze. The last page of the guest book was blank, save for fresh handwriting that hadn't been there the night before. "You're in my room now. The window that faces nothing." The morning sunlight poured through the warped glass of the window, casting strange, refracted patterns on the walls of room 213. Sarah stood in front of it, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The frost from the night before had melted, leaving only streaks of condensation running down the pane. She couldn't stop staring at the faint message etched into the glass. "Leave." "Maybe it's some sort of prank," Tom suggested as he stood behind her, his voice unsure. Kids messing around, scratching it with ice or something. Sarah didn't respond. The words felt deliberate, almost like a warning. Emily and Noah were still asleep, their faces peaceful and undisturbed by the creeping tension in the room. Sarah glanced at her children and decided, "Let's not say anything to them," she whispered. "No need to scare them." Tom nodded, but the unease lingered between them. The first look outside. Later that morning, as the family prepared to explore the lodge grounds, Sarah took another look out the window. She expected to see the breathtaking view described on the lodge's website, the sweeping valley framed by towering pines. But what she saw unsettled her. The window faced a blank, weathered wall. Faded paint peeled from the surface, and patches of mildew crept up from the base. There was no view, just an oppressive, claustrophobic barrier that seemed to press closer the longer she stared at it. "Tom," she called, her voice tinged with confusion. Her husband walked over and followed her gaze. He frowned. "That's odd. How does a wall block the window when we're on the second floor?" Sarah didn't have an answer. A tense exploration. The family spent the afternoon exploring the lodge grounds. The trails around the property were beautiful, winding through dense forests and opening onto meadows bursting with wild flowers. Emily snapped pictures on her phone, her earlier complaints about the lack of Wi-Fi forgotten, while Noah picked up sticks and rocks to add to his growing collection. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time she looked over her shoulder, she half expected to see someone standing in the distance, hidden among the trees. Tom seemed distracted as well. He kept glancing back toward the lodge, his brow furrowed. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. I don't know. This place feels off." Night falls on room 213. That night, the tapping started again. Sarah bolted upright in bed, her heart racing. The sound was faint but insistent. Soft taps against the glass, coming in irregular intervals. She turned to Tom, but he was fast asleep. The kids were curled up in the other bed, undisturbed. Gathering her courage, Sarah swung her legs over the side of the bed and approached the window. She hesitated before pulling the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the blank wall, damp with condensation. But as she turned back to bed, her reflection in the glass caught her eye. It wasn't her reflection. A wrong reflection. The figure in the glass was a distorted version of herself, its face pale, its mouth slightly open as if frozen mid-scream. Its eyes, darker and deeper than her own, stared back at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She stumbled back, clutching her chest as her breath came in short gasps. When she looked again, the reflection was normal. "Sarah?" Tom's groggy voice broke the silence. She turned to see him sitting up in bed, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Go back to sleep." But she didn't sleep at all. Strange complaint. The next morning, Sarah visited the front desk. Marjorie was there, her warm demeanor strained as she busied herself with paperwork. "Excuse me," Sarah began, hesitant. Marjorie looked up, her expression tight. "Yes, Mrs. Miller? I wanted to ask about room 213, Sarah said, lowering her voice. "The window in our room, it doesn't have a view, it just faces a wall." Marjorie's face paled. She glanced around as if to ensure no one else was listening. "The building is old," she said quickly. "Some of the original architecture doesn't make sense." "That's not all," Sarah pressed. "There's a tapping sound at night, and something's wrong with the glass." Marjorie froze, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the edge of the desk. "You're imagining things," she said flatly. "Am I?" Sarah countered. For a moment, Marjorie's mask slipped. "If you value your peace, Mrs. Miller, I'd suggest you stop asking questions about room 213. Emily's discovery. That afternoon, Emily showed Sarah a photo she had taken earlier during their hike. The picture showed Noah standing by a tree, smiling proudly with his stick collection. But in the background, partially obscured by the shadows, was a figure. It was faint, barely visible, but unmistakably human. A woman in an old-fashioned dress, her face turned toward the camera. "Do you remember anyone else being on the trail?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with unease. "No," Sarah said, her stomach twisting. Emily frowned. "It's probably just a trick of the light." Sarah nodded, but she wasn't convinced. The window's secret. That night, Sarah couldn't resist inspecting the window again. With Tom and the kids asleep, she turned on her phone's flashlight and pressed it against the glass. For the first time, she noticed faint scratches etched into the surface, letters and symbols overlapping in chaotic patterns. She strained to make sense of them, her breath fogging the glass. And then she heard it. A whisper. "Come closer." Cliffhanger ending. Sarah stepped back, her heart racing. The scratches on the glass began to glow faintly, their chaotic patterns shifting and realigning into a single, clear message. "Look behind you." Her pulse thundered in her ears as she turned slowly, the room bathed in shadow. And there, standing just behind her, was the distorted figure from the reflection. The guest book. The morning after her unsettling encounter, Sarah felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on her. She hadn't slept. Every sound, every shadow in room 213 had kept her on edge. Tom and the kids seemed oblivious to the growing tension. They chatted over breakfast in the lodge's dining room, their laughter echoing in the otherwise subdued atmosphere. But Sarah couldn't shake the image of the figure she'd seen in the room the night before. As the family finished their meal, Sarah excused herself, muttering something about needing to stretch her legs. She had a different plan, to find answers. A glimpse into the past. The lobby was quieter than usual, with only the faint crackle of the fireplace and the soft rustle of Marjorie's paperwork breaking the silence. Sarah approached the desk, feigning casualness. "Morning, Marjorie," she said. Marjorie glanced up, her face tight. "Mrs. Miller, I was wondering," Sarah began, leaning on the counter, "do you have any records of past guests? You know, for nostalgia's sake?" Marjorie hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "Why would you want that?" "Just curious," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "This place has such a unique history, doesn't it?" Marjorie stared at her for a moment, then sighed. "If you insist." She disappeared into the back office and returned with an old leather-bound guest book. "Keep it brief," she said, sliding the book across the counter. "The guest book secrets." Sarah carried the guest book to a small lounge area near the fireplace. The book was heavy and smelled of aged paper. She flipped through the pages, her heart racing as she scanned the names and comments left by previous guests. At first, the entries were cheerful, filled with glowing reviews of the lodge. "Beautiful view, cozy rooms. A perfect retreat from city life. Can't wait to come back next year." But as she neared the middle of the book, the tone began to change. "Room 213 is strange. Felt like someone was watching me all night. Couldn't sleep. Kept hearing tapping on the window, but there's no tree nearby." One entry, written in shaky handwriting, sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "If you're reading this, don't stay in room 213. They don't like noise. They don't like questions." The vanishing guests. Sarah flipped to the back of the book and noticed something odd. Several pages had been torn out. The jagged edges suggested it hadn't been done carefully. "What are you hiding?" she muttered under her breath. She scanned the remaining entries, her unease growing. Why won't anyone listen? The room is cursed. I saw her. She's still in there. The final entry was dated 2 years ago. No one believes me, but I saw them. I heard them. Don't let them take you, too. The signature was smudged, the name unreadable. A missing family. As Sarah closed the guest book, a framed photograph on the mantel caught her eye. It was a black and white image of a smiling family, a man, a woman, and a young girl standing outside the lodge. Beneath the photo was a small plaque that read, "The Hargrove Family, 1887. Marjorie," Sarah called, her voice steady but firm. The receptionist appeared, her expression wary. "Yes? This family," Sarah said, pointing to the photo. "What happened to them?" Marjorie's face darkened. "The Hargroves were regular guests here. Lovely people. And they disappeared during their last stay." Marjorie admitted reluctantly. "No one ever found them. But that was a long time ago, Mrs. Miller." Sarah's stomach churned. "Which room were they are staying in?" Marjorie hesitated before replying. "Room 213. Confronting Tom. Back in the room, Sarah found Tom flipping through a travel guide while the kids played a card game on the bed. "Tom, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. He looked up, frowning. "What's wrong?" "This place, this room, it's not right," Sarah said, holding up the guest book. "People have disappeared here. Room 213 has a history." Tom sighed. "Sarah, you're letting your imagination get the better of you. It's an old lodge. Old places have stories." "This isn't just a story," she snapped. "There's something happening here, and we're in the middle of it." The tapping returns. That night, the tapping started earlier, just as the family was settling into bed. Tap, tap, tap. Sarah sat bolt upright, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to Tom, who was already sitting up, his face pale. "You hear it now, don't you?" she whispered. Before he could respond, the tapping grew louder, more insistent. Emily whimpered from the other bed. "Mom, what's that noise? What's that noise?" Sarah got up and approached the window, her hands trembling. She pulled back the curtain and froze. The glass was covered in condensation, and in it, a message was scrawled. "Why didn't you leave? Cliffhanger ending." Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. "Noah, Emily, stay close to me," Sarah shouted, her voice shaking. A low whisper filled the room, rising and falling like a chant. It was coming from the walls. "Tom," Sarah screamed. But when she turned, she saw him standing motionless, his eyes fixed on the window. "Tom," she whispered. He didn't respond. And then she saw it. The distorted reflection in the glass, staring back at her with hollow eyes. The locked door. The darkness in room 213 was oppressive, wrapping itself around Sarah like a suffocating blanket. Her heart pounded as the whispered chant ebbed and flowed, an unintelligible rhythm that seemed to pulse in the very walls. "Tom," she called again, her voice breaking. He stood by the window, unmoving, his face eerily blank. Emily and Noah huddled together on one of the beds, their eyes wide with fear. Then, as suddenly as it began, the chanting stopped. The lights flickered back on, bathing the room in a dim yellow glow. "Tom," Sarah whispered, approaching him cautiously. He blinked, his shoulders relaxing as if a spell had been broken. "What just happened?" Before Sarah could respond, Noah's small voice broke the tension. "Mom, there's a door behind the wardrobe." The hidden door. Sarah turned to where Noah was pointing. The wardrobe, a heavy antique piece with ornate carvings, sat flush against the far wall. "A door?" she repeated, her brow furrowing. "It's behind there," Noah insisted. "I saw it when the lights flickered." Tom, now fully alert, joined Sarah in pushing the wardrobe aside. It groaned in protest, scraping against the wooden floor. As they moved it, Sarah's breath caught. There it was, a narrow wooden door. Its paint peeling and hinges rusted. It had no knob, just a small keyhole that seemed to glare at them like an unblinking eye. A chilling discovery. Why would there be a door hidden like this? Tom muttered, running a hand through his hair. Sarah didn't answer. Her attention was fixed on the faint scratches etched into the wood near the keyhole. They looked like claw marks, deep and uneven, as if someone, or something, had tried desperately to get inside. Emily and Noah stood behind her, their faces pale. "What's in there?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Sarah swallowed hard. "We're going to find out." The search for the key. After a thorough search of the room yielded no key, Sarah's frustration mounted. "It has to be here somewhere," she muttered. "Maybe it's better if we don't open it," Tom said cautiously. "We don't know what's behind it, and honestly, I'm not sure that I want to know." Sarah shot him a determined look. "We can't just ignore this. Whatever's happening in this room is connected to that door." Noah, who had been quietly examining the wardrobe, suddenly piped up. "There's something stuck in one of the drawers." Sure enough, wedged at the back of the bottom drawer was a small, rusted key. Sarah pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she held it up to the light. What lies beyond? The key fit perfectly into the lock. Sarah hesitated, glancing back at her family. "Stay back," she said firmly. As she turned the key, a loud click echoed through the room, followed by the slow creak of the door swinging open. The air that rushed out was cold and damp, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. Beyond the threshold was a narrow, pitch-black passage. "Sarah, don't," Tom warned, his voice low. But Sarah couldn't stop herself. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The hidden room. The passage led to a small windowless room that felt older than the rest of the lodge. The walls were lined with faded, peeling wallpaper, and the floor was covered in a layer of dust so thick that Sarah's footsteps left deep imprints. At the center of the room was a single chair, its wood warped and splintered with age. On the chair sat a bundle of old belongings. A child's teddy bear, a cracked porcelain doll, and a stack of yellowed papers tied with string. Sarah approached the bundle cautiously. The papers, brittle and fragile, were covered in faded writing. She untied the string and began to read. The papers were letters, written in the shaky handwriting of someone clearly terrified. "I hear them every night. The whispers won't stop. They're in the walls, watching, waiting. I can't leave. If you find this, please tell my family I'm sorry." I tried to keep quiet. The last letter was signed with a name that made Sarah's stomach twist. Margaret Hargrove. She remembered the photograph in the lobby, the smiling family, the missing Hargroves, the markings on the walls. As Sarah stepped back, her flashlight caught something etched into the walls. Symbols, jagged and chaotic, covered every surface, their lines overlapping like a madman's scribbles. The same symbol she'd seen scratched into the window. Her pulse quickened as the air around her grew colder. The light from her phone flickered, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move across the room. "Sarah?" Tom's voice called from the passage. "What's happening in there?" "Stay back," she shouted, her voice echoing. The door slammed shut. Before Sarah could move, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The room plunged into darkness, and the whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. "You shouldn't have opened it. You broke the silence. Now you belong to us." Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps as she fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, their lines shifting and pulsating like living things. "Sarah," Tom's muffled voice called from the other side. "I'm here," she screamed. "I can't get out." Cliffhanger ending. As the whispers grew deafening, Sarah felt something cold brush against her shoulder. She spun around, her flashlight revealing the chair. It was empty. The bundle of belongings was gone, replaced by a single piece of paper with a message scrawled in fresh ink. "We've been waiting for you, the lost guest." The hidden room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into Sarah's bones and made her limbs feel heavy. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at the note left on the chair. "We've been waiting for you, Sarah." Tom's voice came from the other side of the door, muffled but frantic. "I'm okay," she shouted back, though her voice wavered. "The door won't open." Tom's pounding on the door echoed through the room. Sarah's flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure standing in the corner. When she turned the beam, there was nothing. "Escape?" With trembling hands, Sarah pushed against the door, her strength fueled by panic. It groaned on its hinges before suddenly flying open, sending her stumbling into Tom's arms. "Are you okay?" he asked, gripping her shoulders. Sarah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fine, but there's something in there. Something wrong." Tom glanced over her shoulder into the dark passage. "We need to leave. Now." The name Margaret Hargrove. Back in the main room, the family huddled together. Emily and Noah clung to Sarah, their small faces pale with fear. "I found something," Sarah said, holding up the letters she'd retrieved from the hidden room. "What is it?" Tom asked. "They're from Margaret Hargrove," Sarah replied. "The woman from the photograph in the lobby. She and her family disappeared from this room." Tom frowned. "And you think they were taken by whatever's going on here?" Sarah nodded. "The symbols, the whispers, it's all connected to room 213. And I think Margaret knew. Research at the library." Determined to learn more, Sarah and Tom left the kids with Lily, the lodge's housekeeper, who had reluctantly agreed to keep an eye on them. They drove into the nearest town, a small community nestled at the foot of the mountains. The local library was a quaint building with creaky floors and shelves overflowing with dusty books. The librarian, an elderly man with round glasses, greeted them warmly. "What can I help you find?" he asked. "Do you have any records on a family called the Hargroves?" Sarah asked. They stayed at the Sunset Lodge in the late 80s. The librarian's smile faltered. "The Hargroves? Yes, I remember them. Their disappearance was the talk of the town for years, uncovering the past." The librarian led them to a back room filled with old newspapers and town records. Sarah and Tom pored over the articles, their unease growing with every headline. "Local family vanishes without a trace. Mystery at Sunset Lodge. Disturbing details emerge in Hargrove case. Room 213, under scrutiny. Witnesses speak of strange noises, flickering lights before disappearance." One article included an interview with a former lodge employee who claimed to have seen Margaret Hargrove the night before she vanished. "She was acting strange," the employee had said, kept muttering about keeping quiet and the shadows watching. "She left a note, but I never saw what it said." A journal entry. Among the papers was a photocopy of Margaret Hargrove's journal, written shortly before her disappearance. Sarah read it aloud, her voice trembling. "The tapping started the first night. I thought it was just the wind, but it wasn't. They're in the walls, waiting for us to make a mistake. Tommy tried to play his music last night, but I stopped him. They don't like noise, Noise brings them closer. If anyone finds this, please tell my family I tried to protect them. But I think it's too late. They've already chosen us. Tom exhaled sharply. This can't be real. Sarah's hands shook as she set the journal down. It's real, Tom. And we're next. The lodge's dark history. The librarian hesitated before speaking. There's something you should know about that room. What is it? Sarah asked. Room 213 was added during a renovation in the 1950s, he explained. Before that, the area was sealed off. There were rumors of strange occurrences, missing workers, unexplained accidents. The lodge's original owner, George Winslow, said it was a cursed space and had it bricked up. Why would they open it back up? Tom asked. The librarian shrugged. Greed, maybe. Or ignorance, but ever since, anyone who stays in that room doesn't stay long. Returning to the lodge. Armed with their newfound knowledge, Sarah and Tom returned to the lodge. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley. When they entered room 213, the air felt heavier than before. The hidden door was still ajar, and the whispers had returned, faint but persistent. Did you find anything? Emily asked, her voice small. Sarah knelt in front of her children. Yes. And we're going to fix this. But you both need to stay with Lily for a while, okay? Emily and Noah nodded reluctantly, their fear evident. Cliffhanger ending. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she noticed something strange. The letters she'd found in the hidden room were scattered across the desk, though she hadn't touched them. On top of the pile was a single new page, written in the same shaky handwriting as Margaret's letters. You can't leave now. The door is open. Sarah froze as the tapping began again, louder this time, and accompanied by a low, guttural whisper. We're coming, the whispering walls. The tapping didn't stop. It echoed through the room, relentless and rhythmic, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. Sarah sat at the desk, staring at the new page atop the pile of letters, her fingers gripping the edges, so tightly her knuckles turned white. You can't leave now. The door is open. Sarah, what's going on? Tom's voice startled her, pulling her from her trance. He stood in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. They know we're here, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. They've been waiting for us. Tom stepped closer, his eyes darting to the pile of letters. This is insane. We need to pack up the kids and leave right now. Sarah turned to face him. And go where? Whatever this is, it's tied to room 213. If we leave without understanding it, we'll carry it with us. The first crack in the walls. As they spoke, a faint noise interrupted them. A low, grating sound like nails scraping across wood. It was coming from the far wall near the hidden door. Tom moved cautiously toward it, pressing his ear against the surface. The moment he did, he recoiled. What is it? Sarah asked. Tom's face was ashen. It's whispering. Sarah hesitated, then approached the wall herself. As she leaned in, she heard Ida's soft chorus of overlapping voices, too faint to distinguish but unmistakably human. The whispers grew louder as Sarah pressed her hand against the wall. It was cold, colder than the rest of the room, and as her fingers lingered, the texture felt wrong, damp and uneven. Suddenly, a hairline crack appeared, running vertically along the plaster. Tom, get back, Sarah said, pulling him away. Emily's revelation. The next morning, Emily approached Sarah hesitantly. Mom, I need to tell you something, she said, glancing nervously at the walls. What is it, sweetie? Sarah asked, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. Emily fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. Last night, I heard them. Heard what? The voices, Emily whispered. They were calling my name, and I saw her. Sarah's stomach dropped. Who did you see? The lady from the picture, Emily said. She was standing by the window, but her face was wrong, like it was melting. Margaret's warning. Sarah couldn't ignore the growing signs that whatever haunted room 213 was intensifying. She turned to the letters from Margaret Hargrove, searching for anything that might explain the cracks in the walls and the increasingly aggressive whispers. One entry stood out. The walls are alive. They listen. They remember. I think they're part of it, part of the thing that watches us. If the walls crack, the way will open. And if the way opens, we're all lost. The walls are alive, Sarah muttered, her pulse quickening. What does that even mean? The entity reveals itself. That night, the Millers barricaded the hidden door and pushed the wardrobe back into place. But the oppressive presence in the room remained, thickening the air and making it hard to breathe. As the family huddled together, the whispers returned, louder than ever. This time, they were clearer, the words overlapping in a chaotic symphony. You can't escape. The door is open. We are coming. The lights flickered violently, and the walls began to tremble. Cracks spread like veins, the plaster crumbling to reveal dark, rotted wood beneath. And then they saw it, a shadow, moving within the walls, its form shifting and stretching like smoke. It pressed against the cracks, as though trying to push through. Get the kids out of here, Sarah shouted to Tom, her voice rising over the din. Tom grabbed Emily and Noah, ushering them toward the door, but the doorknob wouldn't turn. It's locked, he yelled. The lodges cursed. Desperate, Sarah turned to the letters again, her eyes scanning the frantic scrawls for anything that might help. Her gaze landed on a single sentence. Noise binds them. Silence frees them. Noise, Sarah whispered. That's why they hate it. She grabbed a metal lamp from the bedside table and slammed it against the wall. The sound reverberated through the room like a gunshot. The whispers faltered, replaced by a low, guttural growl. The shadow within the walls recoiled, its form flickering as if in pain. Tom, keep making noise, Sarah shouted. Tom grabbed a chair and smashed it against the floor, the kids joining in with whatever they could find. The cacophony grew, and the shadow began to fade, retreating deeper into the cracks. A temporary victory. As the last of the shadow disappeared, the room fell eerily silent. The cracks in the walls stopped spreading, though they didn't fully disappear. Tom dropped the broken chair, his chest heaving. What the hell was that? I don't know, Sarah admitted, her voice trembling. But it's not gone, it's just waiting. Cliffhanger ending. Later that night, as the family tried to rest, Sarah stayed awake, sitting by the window with the letters spread out before her. Her eyes flicked to the crack in the wall, now partially covered by a hastily hung blanket. And then she heard it again. The faint tapping, coming from the window this time. Sarah turned slowly, her breath catching as she saw a message forming in the condensation on the glass. The way is still open. The night terror. The lodge was unnaturally quiet that night, the kind of quiet that pressed on the ears and filled the mind with dread. Room 213 seemed to hold its breath as the Millers settled in, their nerves frayed, and their bodies exhausted. Tom sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. Emily and Noah were curled up under the blankets, their wide eyes darting toward every flicker of movement in the dim room. Sarah paced by the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Do you think it's over? Emily whispered. Sarah stopped, her eyes fixed on the frost that was beginning to creep across the window pane. No, she said softly, it's not over. The calm before the storm. For a while, the only sound was the ticking of the bedside clock. Tom eventually lay down, his arm draped protectively over the kids. Sarah remained by the window, unable to shake the tension gripping her chest. The tapping began again, Soft at first, barely audible, it grew louder with each repetition. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't just coming from the window this time. The sound echoed from the walls, the floor, even the ceiling, surrounding them in a maddening rhythm. "Mom?" Noah's voice trembled. "What's happening?" Sarah turned to the room, her voice steady despite her fear. "Stay together. Don't leave the bed." The shadows take form. The room grew colder, the air thick and oppressive. The shadows in the corners began to move, twisting and stretching like living things. And then they emerged. Figures, dark and featureless, slid from the cracks in the walls, their elongated limbs moving with unnatural grace, their heads tilted at odd angles, as if studying the family. One of the figures stepped closer, its hollow face turning toward Sarah. "Leave us alone," she screamed, grabbing the metal lamp from the desk and swinging it at the figure. The lamp passed through it, striking the wall behind. The figure didn't flinch. "The kid's in danger." Emily screamed as another figure reached toward her, its long, shadowy fingers stretching toward the bed. "No!" Sarah shouted, rushing to her daughter. She grabbed a chair and slammed it onto the ground, the loud noise making the figure recoil. "It worked before," she told Tom. "Make noise." Tom grabbed a heavy book and hurled it against the wall. The kids banged their fists on the headboard. The figures hesitated, their movements jerky and disjointed. But then the shadows regrouped, their forms solidifying. The largest of them leaned forward, its face inches from Sarah's. "You opened the way," it whispered, its voice a low, guttural growl. "The entity attacks." The lights in the room flickered violently before going out completely. The shadows swarmed, their forms blending together into a single, massive presence that loomed over the bed. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a deafening. Sarah grabbed Emily and Noah, pulling them to the floor. Tom stood in front of them, his fists clenched. "What do you want?" Tom shouted into the darkness. The entity's voice boomed, shaking the wall. "To take what is ours." The window breaks. The window shattered suddenly, glass spraying across the room. The cold mountain air rushed in, but the darkness seemed unaffected. It poured toward the window, drawn to the outside, as though the shattering glass had opened a new path. Sarah saw her chance. "Tom, the door." Tom ran to the door, fumbling with the lock. It wouldn't budge. The entity's shadow shifted toward him, its massive form pressing against the door as if blocking their escape. "A desperate plan. Noise binds them," Sarah whispered, remembering Margaret Hargrove's words. She grabbed a metal trash can and hurled it against the desk, the loud crash echoing through the room. The entity faltered, its form rippling like a disrupted reflection. "Tom, help me," she shouted. Tom joined in, smashing furniture, slamming drawers, anything to create a cacophony that might drive the entity back. The whispers turned into an angry howl, and the shadows writhed violently, pulling away from the family. The final strike. Sarah spotted the bundle of letters on the desk. The symbols on the pages seemed to pulse with a faint light, their lines shifting and twisting. She grabbed the letters and held them up. "Is this what you want?" she shouted at the entity. The shadows stopped, their forms quivering as if drawn to the pages. Tom grabbed a lighter from his pocket and flicked it on. "Burn them," he said. Sarah hesitated. "What if?" "Burn them," Tom roared. She held the lighter to the letters, and the paper caught quickly, the flames licking at the symbols. The room filled with an ear-piercing shriek as the shadows convulsed, their forms disintegrating into smoke. Cliffhanger ending. As the last of the shadows faded, the room fell silent. The whispers were gone, and the oppressive cold lifted. The family sat together on the floor,
trembling but alive. "Is it over?" Emily whispered. Before Sarah could answer, a faint tapping sound came from the broken window. She turned slowly, her heart sinking as she saw it. Another message, scratched into the glass shards still clinging to the frame. "You can't destroy us. The way is open."
The hidden room. The room was in shambles. Broken glass glittered across the floor, furniture lay overturned, and the oppressive cold had finally lifted. Yet the atmosphere in room 213 remained heavy with unspoken dread. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers trembling as she clutched the lighter she had used to burn the letters. The faint tapping from the broken window still echoed in her ears, a grim reminder that the nightmare wasn't over. Tom stood by the door, his hand hovering over the lock. "We need to leave," he said, his voice tight. "Now. We'll find another way out if we have to." Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the hidden door, still slightly ajar, the darkness beyond it calling to her. "Sarah," Tom said, stepping closer. "I need to go back in there," she whispered. Tom froze. "Are you out of your mind? After what just happened?" "Whatever this thing is, it's tied to that room," Sarah said, standing. "If we don't figure out what it wants, it won't stop. It'll follow us." Returning to the hidden room. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, Sarah and Tom moved the wardrobe aside once more. Emily and Noah, pale but determined, sat huddled on the bed, their small hands clutching each other. "Stay here," Sarah instructed them, her voice firm. The hidden door creaked as Sarah pushed it open, the air beyond it thick and damp. The faint smell of decay was stronger now, making her gag as she stepped inside. Tom followed reluctantly, the crowbar gripped tightly in his hands, the room's true nature. The hidden room was different this time. The dust and decay were gone, replaced by an almost surgical cleanliness. The walls were bare, their strange symbols glowing faintly. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface smooth and black like obsidian. On top of it rested an old leather-bound book, its cover marked with the same jagged symbols that adorned the walls. Sarah approached it cautiously, her flashlight flickering as if protesting the room's presence. "What is that?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah reached out and opened the book. The pages were filled with cramped, uneven handwriting, interspersed with strange diagrams and drawings. The Watcher's Purpose. As Sarah flipped through the pages, a chilling narrative began to emerge. The book described an ancient entity, referred to only as the Watcher, a malevolent force that thrived on silence and secrecy. It had been bound to the lodge decades ago, its presence sealed away in the hidden room. But the seal was imperfect. Over time, cracks had formed, both literal and figurative, and the entity had begun to seep out, drawing power from the fear and suffering from those who stayed in room 213. The Watcher feeds on those who disturb the silence. One passage read, "Noise binds it, but silence sets it free. Once the way is open, it will claim what it is owed. The price of survival." "What does it mean, claim what it is owed?" Tom asked, his face pale. Sarah turned to the final page, her stomach twisting as she read the words scrawled across it. "A life for the way. A life for the silence." Her breath caught. "It demands a sacrifice," she whispered. Tom's eyes widened. "No, no way, we're not." "Not us," Sarah interrupted. She pointed to the book. "It already has one. Margaret Hargrove, she tried to close the way, and she paid the price. That's why she and her family disappeared." Tom's grip on the crowbar tightened. "So what does it want now?" Before Sarah could answer, the walls began to tremble. The Watcher appears. The glowing symbols on the walls grew brighter, pulsating like a heartbeat. The air thickened, pressing down on Sarah and Tom like a physical weight. And then it came. The shadow emerged from the cracks, twisting and coiling like smoke. It formed a towering figure, its hollow eyes fixed on Sarah. "You opened the way," the Watcher said, its voice reverberating through the room. "You must pay the price." Sarah stepped back, her heart pounding. "I don't understand. What do you want?" The Watcher tilted its head, its form rippling. A life for the silence. A terrible choice. Tom moved in front of Sarah, raising the crowbar. "You're not taking her," he shouted. The Watcher didn't flinch. Its hollow gaze shifted to the pedestal, where the book remained open. The pages turned on their own, settling on a diagram of a circle surrounded by runes. Sarah's flashlight flickered, and a voice echoed in her mind, Margaret's voice. "You can't fight it. You can only end it." She realized with sickening clarity what the entity wanted. "It's not us," she said, her voice trembling. "It's the kids." Tom's face twisted in horror. "No, that's not happening. The hidden room's purpose." The pedestal began to glow, and the Watcher's form grew larger, its whispers filling the air. The glowing runes on the wall shifted, aligning to form a single, unbroken pattern. "It's using them," Sarah said. "Their fear, their presence, it's feeding off them to stay here." Tom looked at her, desperation in his eyes. "Then how do we stop it?" Sarah stared at the book, the diagram burning into her mind. "We have to close the way. For good." Cliffhanger ending. Before Sarah could explain further, the Watcher surged forward, its massive form blotting out the light. The door to the hidden room slammed shut, trapping her and Tom inside. From beyond the door they heard Emily's scream. And then, silence. The presence revealed. The silence in the hidden room was suffocating. A void that amplified the pounding of Sarah's heart. She and Tom stood frozen, their breaths shallow as the Watcher's shadow loomed over them. The dim glow of the runes on the walls cast flickering patterns across its featureless form. From beyond the door, Emily's scream echoed once more, followed by Noah's frantic voice. "Mom, Dad, help us." Tom lunged for the door, slamming the crowbar against it with all his strength. "Open, damn it," he shouted, his voice cracking, but the door didn't budge. Sarah grabbed his arm. "Tom, stop. It's not just the door, it's the room. The Watcher controls it." The entity's hollow gaze shifted toward them, its towering form rippling like smoke caught in an unseen wind. "The way is open," it intoned, its voice a low, guttural resonance that seemed to vibrate through the walls. "The price must be paid." A desperate plea. "What do you want from us?" Sarah demanded, stepping forward despite her trembling legs. The Watcher's shadow twisted, narrowing as if to focus on her. "You disturbed the silence. The way demands balance. A life for the silence. A life for the way." Tom stepped in front of Sarah, his grip on the crowbar tightening. "You are not taking her. You are not taking anyone." The Watcher didn't respond, its hollow eyes fixed on Sarah. She felt its gaze pierce through her, cold and unrelenting, as if it could see every fear, every doubt she had ever harbored. Emily's vision. On the other side of the door, Emily and Noah huddled together on the bed, their small hands clutching each other. The shadows in the room had grown thicker, shifting and writhing like living things. Emily stared at the broken window, her breath catching as a figure began to form in the shards of glass. It was a woman, her face pale and distorted, her eyes wide with terror. Who are you?" Emily whispered. The woman's mouth moved, but no sound came. She pointed toward the hidden door, her expression desperate. "She's trying to tell us something," Emily said, her voice trembling. Noah looked at her, his eyes wide. "What is it?" "I don't know," Emily said, "but I think she's trying to help." A revelation. Back in the hidden room, Sarah's mind raced as she flipped through the ancient book on the pedestal. The runes on the walls pulsed with a steady rhythm, growing brighter with each passing moment. "There has to be a way to close it," she muttered. Tom glanced over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. "What if the only way is—" Sarah cut him off. "No. We're not sacrificing anyone. There has to be another way." Her eyes landed on a passage near the back of the book, written in a frantic scrawl. "Noise binds it, silence frees it, the way can be sealed, but only if the Watcher is forced to retreat to its origin. The Watcher's origin, Sarah said aloud. That's the hidden room. We have to drive it back in here. A plan of resistance. How? Tom asked. Sarah pointed to the runes on the walls. These symbols, they're part of a binding spell. If we can amplify their power, we might be able to trap it again. Tom frowned. Amplify how? Sarah thought for a moment, then grabbed the flashlight from her pocket. Light, sound, anything to disrupt it. Tom nodded, his determination hardening. Let's do it. The final confrontation. As the Watcher's shadow expanded, the cracks in the walls of room 213 began to spread. The runes glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat as Sarah and Tom worked frantically to create noise. Tom banged the crowbar against the walls, his movements wild and desperate. Sarah grabbed a small speaker from her bag, blasting music at full volume. The discordant sounds echoed through the room, clashing with the Watcher's guttural whispers. The entity writhed, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain its presence. From the other side of the door, Emily's voice rang out. Mom, the lady in the window says to use the cracks. Use the cracks in the walls. Sarah's eyes darted to the cracks spidering across the plaster. The jagged lines glowed faintly, as if connected to the runes. Tom, aim for the cracks, she shouted. A terrible choice. Tom swung the crowbar with all his strength, striking the largest crack. The walls trembled violently, and the Watcher let out an unearthly roar. The runes flared, their light blinding as the cracks widened, revealing dark, pulsing voids beneath. Sarah grabbed the book from the pedestal and hurled it into the largest crack. The shadows recoiled, their forms collapsing into themselves as the void began to pull them in. The Watcher turned its gaze to Sarah, its hollow eyes filled with something resembling rage or fear. You cannot contain me, it growled. Sarah met its gaze, her voice steady. Watch me. The way closes. With a final, deafening roar, the Watcher's form was pulled into the void. The cracks in the walls sealed shut, the runes dimming until only faint traces remained. The room fell silent once more, but this time the silence was different, calm, almost peaceful. The hidden door swung open, and Emily and Noah rushed in, throwing themselves into Sarah's arms. We thought you were gone, Emily sobbed. We're here, Sarah said, holding them tightly. We're all here. Cliffhanger ending. As the family prepared to leave the lodge, Sarah glanced back at room 213 one last time. The door stood ajar, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow flicker across the threshold. In the distance, faint tapping echoed from the broken window. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go. Sarah nodded. But as they walked away, a single thought lingered in her mind. Is it really over? Check-out time. The morning sun broke over the mountain peaks, bathing the lodge in golden light. It felt surreal. This place, which had been the site of so much terror, now looked almost serene. Sarah stood in the center of room 213, her eyes scanning the cracks in the walls, the faintly glowing runes, and the shattered window. The hidden door was sealed once more, its edges barely visible beneath the patched wallpaper. Are we ready? Tom asked from the doorway, his voice low and weary. Sarah nodded. Let's go. Emily and Noah were already in the car, their faces pale but calm. They hadn't spoken much since the events of the previous night, and Sarah didn't blame them. The final checkout. In the lobby, Marjorie greeted them with her usual tight smile, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of relief. Leaving so soon? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Yes, Sarah replied curtly. She placed the room key on the desk, her fingers lingering on the worn brass fob. Marjorie glanced at the key, then back at Sarah. Did you enjoy your stay? Sarah's jaw tightened. I think you already know the answer to that. For a moment, the two women stared at each other. Then Marjorie sighed, her shoulders sagging. I am sorry, she whispered. For what? Sarah demanded. Marjorie's gaze dropped to the desk. For not warning you. For letting you stay in that room. Sarah leaned in, her voice sharp. What is this place, Marjorie? What's really going on here? The older woman hesitated, then said quietly, "This lodge, it's not like other places. It holds on to things, people, and once it chooses someone, it doesn't let go easily." The road ahead. As the family drove away from the lodge, the tension in the car began to ease. Emily and Noah dozed in the back seat, their small heads resting against each other. Tom reached over and took Sarah's hand. "We made it," he said, his voice soft. Sarah squeezed his hand, but she couldn't shake the lingering unease in her chest. The lodge was behind them, but it didn't feel like the end. The photographs. Later that evening, after they had settled into a small motel miles away from the lodge, Sarah unpacked her bag and found Emily's camera. She flipped through the photos, smiling faintly at the images of her children laughing on the trails and posing by the lake. For a moment, the horrors of room 213 felt distant, almost unreal. But as she scrolled, her heart stopped. One photo, taken in front of the lodge, showed the family smiling at the camera. In the background, just behind the lobby window, a dark figure stood watching them. Its form was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Sarah's breath hitched as she swiped to the next photo. This one showed Emily and Noah by the broken window of room 213. The same shadowy figure stood just inside the room, its hollow eyes fixed on the children. The whisper returns. Sarah's hand trembled as she set the camera down. She turned to Tom, her voice shaking. "Look at these." Tom studied the photos, his face growing pale. That's not possible. We were alone." Before Sarah could respond, a faint tapping sound filled the room. Tap, tap, tap. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned toward the motel room window. Frost was creeping along the glass, forming jagged, intricate patterns. As she approached, a single word appeared, scratched into the frost. "Hello." Final scene. The watcher's whisper. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but Sarah recognized it immediately. "The way is never closed." The motel room fell silent, and Sarah turned back to Tom, her face pale. "We didn't escape," she whispered. "It's still with us."